Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my workshop. My name is Carla Viela, and I'm an intern here at the Advanced School of Politics at Leadership Institute, and I will be hosting this workshop. Today, we will cover how campaign finance works, including the role of PAC and party contributions, the basics of compliance, and how campaigns build and manage a working budget. So before we start and introduce our speakers, here you have our link tree, and make sure that you can check all our social media links such as Instagram or LinkedIn. And let me show you also as well, introduce you to our upcoming trainings. So here you have the Campaign Fundraising School that's going to take place from May 5th through May 7th here in Arlington, Virginia. So the workshop that we're hosting today is also going to have a lot of elements on that particular training. But we also have other trainings that are upcoming, such as the COE, which is our Conservative Organizational Entrepreneur School. That's going to take place from March 23rd through March 24th. And then obviously we have also our CLC, our Campaign Leadership College. That's going to be from June 19 all the way through June 28. And don't forget as well about our allocate that's going to be in San Francisco. And you have the QR code to register here as well as the link. And as well, we have our International School of Fundraising. So for now, the registration is on pause for the time being, but it should take place from July 12th through July 16 in Jerusalem, in Israel. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our first speaker. We have today Ashley, that has over 15 years of experience in political compliance, fundraising, and strategy. She's a seasoned professional who leads CFS, Campaign and Party Division, and Ashley will present to us today PACs and party money.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Carla, for the introduction. Hopefully y'all can hear me okay. If you're ready for me to get started, I'll go ahead and take over the screen share. If you've got more, no worries.
Mhm.
Okay,
There
super.
you go.
Okay, super. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So, as Carla mentioned, my name is Ashley Haycock. I am the Chief Operating Officer at CFS Compliance. We manage compliance for all types of entities all across the political spectrum. So we have state parties and PACs, as we're going to talk about today. We've got federal campaigns, state campaigns, supers, all the types of entities you can imagine. We do compliance work with them. So I have been with CFS for over 7 years, but prior to that, I ran a congressional campaign for about a decade. So I have personal background in running campaigns, and then now I get to kind of be on the inside track, helping campaigns be successful and managing all their filings and finances and strategy and those pieces. So I'm looking forward to talking with y'all today about state parties and PACs and how these can be helpful to you. A couple of disclaimers to start. So first, I'm going to talk about everything on the federal side, mostly because 50 states, 50 different sets of rules, which means that while a lot of states do mirror what the federal FEC has set up, that also does not necessarily apply to every specific state and every specific scenario. So just keep that in mind as we go through. The second thing I want to say is if you walk away from this presentation with nothing else, please know that these tools are available to you. They are extremely useful if you use them correctly, and they are complex. So what I would say is know that they're there, know that you can use them, know that they may require some support from a compliance professional such as myself or from others that do this work as well. So mostly though, I want to go through what these tools are, how to use them, and then we'll answer some questions at the end. Okay. So the way we're going to talk about these tools is with two sets of understanding of how we run our campaigns. The first is if you're running in a safe seat, and the second is if you're running in a competitive seat. If you're in a safe seat, This is good for you, but please know that the tools are really only available when you are the presumptive nominee. So a lot of these tools are not available to you in a primary. If you're in a safe seat running in a competitive primary, you're going to have to wait until you get through the primary in order to make use of most of these tools. However, once you do get through the primary, these can be incredibly powerful tools for leveraging your fundraising for future relationship building. So when we talk about leadership packs here in a second, we have had clients who get through a competitive primary and then they use the next 6 months to focus on building relationships, building a donor network, building a network with other members, and then they arrive in DC in January when they're sworn in, and they already have a whole series of relationships ready to go. This is also really helpful for, if you have a strong donor base, but you don't have an immediate need for large scale campaign spending. So if you've got any donors that are giving you more than $7,000, you need to know that these tools are available and you need to be able to make use of them. So now if you're in a competitive seat, these tools will help you stretch every dollar of your campaign budget as far as it can go, because when you're trying to figure out how to manage your mail and your digital and your field work and your media buys and all the things, we want to make sure every single dollar that you raise goes as far as it can go. It's going to give you additional strategies for tapping your big donors. As I mentioned, if you have a donor who has capacity and willingness to give you more than $7,000, you need to be paying attention to these tools and how to use them. It also, if you're in a competitive seat and you're receiving national attention and you're getting national party support, we need to be aware of these tools as well, because it's important to know what they can do to help you, and also make sure that you're taking advantage of those dynamics as well. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is leadership packs. So a leadership pack is a pack set up by a sponsoring candidate that is designed to support other candidates and incumbents financially. So from the FEC perspective, it is a regular pack, but what makes it a leadership pack is it has a sponsoring candidate. So when we talk about limits and things when we get down the road, it's the same category as a corporate PAC, as a non-connected PAC, but it's called a leadership PAC because it is tied to a candidate. In a safe seat, your leadership PAC is really useful for building relationships with other members. This is kind of why they were created, is because if you have a leadership PAC and you're raising money into this bucket in addition to your campaign bucket, you can use it to start building relationships, supporting others in your state who are in competitive seats, supporting other members, using it for relationship building, building up your profile before you even get elected. As I mentioned, one of the most successful examples of this we saw was a client who won a competitive primary, spent the next 6 months raising money into his leadership PAC and giving it out to other campaigns and incumbents that were in competitive seats. And then when he got to Washington, he had a whole variety of relationships that he had already established and positioned himself well within the party. In a competitive seat, at a minimum, you can contribute up to the limit to your own campaign. So when your PAC starts out, it is what's called non-qualified, and the limit that it can give to your campaign is $3,500. But once it becomes qualified, that goes up to $5,000 per election. So if you have a donor who can give you another $7,000 on top of the $7,000 they've already given you, and you set up a leadership PAC, the leadership PAC can take in those donations and then turn around and give back to your own campaign up to the legal limit. So at a minimum, it's that. But it does provide good opportunities to donate to other campaigns, so who may in turn donate to your campaign. And this is a really common practice. People talk about it as a swap. It's not a term that I love because it has this sort of like I don't know, pay to play kind of implication, but that's not what's going on here. It's not a way to circumvent limits. It's not a way to do anything untoward, but what you see is people that raise money into a leadership PAC. The leadership PAC gives to another person's campaign. So let's say Carla and I are both running for Congress. I raise money to my leadership PAC. My leadership PAC gives Carla the $3,500 to her campaign. Carla then turns around from her leadership PAC and gives $3,500 back to my campaign. And so those kind of relationship dynamics can be really helpful and kind of help maximize both the relationship building aspect and the dollars that can come into your campaign. So it's a super helpful tool, again, if you have someone willing to give above the $7,000. All right, let's talk about exempt activities. So there are certain types of campaign activities that are exempt from both the definition of contribution and the definition of expenditure, which means that they're not subject to those limits. So there's a slide later in the presentation where we'll talk about contribution limits. There are obviously certain limits to what a party committee is able to give to your campaign, either the national party or your state party. There's also a limit on what those parties are able to spend on behalf of your campaign on coordinated activities, and we'll talk about those in a second. But for exempt activities, this can include GOTV materials distributed by volunteers, including mail. Here's why this is relevant. Your state party has access to the nonprofit mail rate. So when you are conceptualizing your mail budget for your campaign, imagine I told you, hey, you have about $500,000 mail budget. And with your $500,000 mail budget, you can send 15 pieces of mail to your universe of 60,000 voters. But if I told you that that postage was not half of what was originally in your budget, all of a sudden your 15 pieces becomes 18 pieces, or your universe that was 60,000 voters becomes 80,000 voters, or whatever it is. If you can take advantage of the state party's nonprofit mail rate, then your mail becomes cheaper. How do we do that? Okay, if you're in a safe seat, then your party as the presumptive nominee is allowed to spend funds on a variety of activities supporting your candidate. And mail is the biggest example of this, but it can also be a field program. So let's say you're trying to work with your state party on a field program, and you're trying to coordinate on lists and knockers and palm cards and all the pieces of that. Working with the state party, it can be a really important piece of that plan and overall strategy. However, it is important to note that your state party must meet specific criteria for the activities to qualify as exempt. The primary qualification is that volunteer distribution. So think about it like, and mail houses are familiar with this, parties are familiar with this. They have to have volunteers involved in the distribution. They also are in control of the piece, meaning they sign off on compliance, they sign off on legal, it has their disclaimer on it, they pay for it, and all of that is driven by the party. However, if you're thinking about, again, your competitive seat, it can make your mail significantly cheaper and make a real impact on your ability to hit more voters, send more pieces, get your message further. So how does this work in practice? We're going to kind of talk about how to raise money for this and how to actually do the mechanics of this process. But it's important to know that this is available to you. It's also important to know that this is driven by a relationship with your state party. When you give money to your state party, the state party is not obligated to spend that money on your campaign. It is not permitted to earmark money for a particular purpose. And that is where this relationship dynamic becomes incredibly important. So make sure that you take the time to establish a good relationship with your state party, that you understand those dynamics, and that you understand how this process is going to work from their end as well as from yours, because it really can make a big difference. Okay. use it or lose it in an off year. So when we get into the fundraising component of this presentation, this is going to become more relevant, but there is no limit on transfers between the campaign and the party or between the national party and the state party, meaning you can transfer as much money as you want to your state party or the national party, and there are no limits to what you are allowed to transfer to them. So when you are thinking about how to raise money, it's important to understand that the campaign operates on election cycle limits, meaning primary limits and general limits. The state party and the national party and your leadership PAC operate on annual limits. So they operate on a calendar year limit. That means that when you are preparing for a campaign, the off year can be an incredibly important time for fundraising. Obviously, right now we're in an election year, but know that the off year can be a really important time for fundraising, because if you have a donor who is willing to give you $10,000 to help with your mail, to help with your field program, to help free up more fungible dollars out of your campaign, they can give your state party or your national party $10,000 in the off year and $10,000 in the election year. So taking advantage of their annual limits is incredibly important, and understanding how that makes a difference for you raising money is important. So first of all, if you're raising money for the national party, I don't know if everybody knows this, but once you become a member of Congress, the national party has dues. So depending on how far up you are in leadership or the committees that you're on or other things like that, the dues vary. They're usually anywhere from $100,000 a cycle to, well over $1 million. So there's a lot of variation there. But because of those unlimited transfers, a lot of people rely on transferring campaign dollars to the party to meet their dues. However, if you raise the money for the national party, that can offset your dues. And when your campaign dollars, when you're thinking about your buckets of money that you can spend from, your campaign dollars are your most fungible dollars, meaning there is the most flexibility, there is the most of opportunity for variety of what you can spend it on. And it gets less fungible as we go throughout the committees. And so you really want to preserve those campaign dollars, right? Those are sacred. You work hard to raise them. They're the hardest to raise and the easiest to spend. And so we want to preserve them. So when we're meeting your national party dues, if you're just transferring your campaign money off to the national party, you really aren't taking advantage of what you should be or thinking about how you can raise the money. So if you're in a safe seat, using those non-election years to raise money for the national party can be a big difference. Now, if you're in a competitive seat, you can transfer unlimited amounts to support exempt activities. So that $500,000 mail budget that we were just talking about, you can offload that off of your campaign budget entirely if you're able to raise the money for the state party. So, or in some cases, raising money for the national party to help maximize coordinated expenditures. So we'll talk about that next. But keeping in mind that if you are able to, any dollars that you can raise for the state and national party, that can help offload pieces of your budget in a competitive seat, whether it's for mail, their field program again, some digital things, all of that. So taking advantage of that non-election year to raise that money is important. And I'm going to give you a vehicle to do that here in just a minute. Okay. The loophole for coordinated expenditures. So the state and national parties can make special expenditures in the general. So again, out of your primary in the general, that do not count against contribution limits and can be coordinated with the campaign. So this is important to know. Again, in the safe seat, you got to get through the primary first in order for this to be relevant. However, you can support future coordinated expenditures by raising money for the state and national party. And then if you're in a competitive seats, again, the coordinated expenditure limit, this has the 2024 limit on it. I believe the 2026 limit is like 63.6, something like that. So they can spend money beyond what they are allowed to contribute. So the National Party can only give you $5,000 in hard cash, but they can coordinate with you and spend up to, I think that's 63.6 on a variety of activities. So 63.6, that's a significant digital spend. So if you're thinking about, again, that kind of overall campaign budget, if you can offload over $60,000 of your digital spend to the National Party, that's significant. That frees up a lot more dollars for you on the campaign side. And again, we're always trying to preserve those campaign dollars. Now, we're going to talk again about how to raise money for that, but important to know that this is another pot that you can fill. So you can fill that exempt activity pot. You can fill this coordinated expenditure pot. Okay. How do we do this? Okay. Joint fundraising committees, just for cash. So joint fundraising committees exist as a fundraising vehicle. And they are a vehicle that combines the limits of the participating committees and distributes those funds in an order that meets the most urgent needs. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you a graphic that I think will help make this even more clear. But it's important to know that you're not getting around limits. You're not, skirting limits. This is not, some way to do something untoward. It's a way to make it an easier sell to your donors and help you raise money for some of these activities that we just talked about. So in a safe seat, sort of the most common JFC setup that we see contains your campaign, your leadership pack, and the national party. And what this does is I don't know if anybody's ever tried to raise money for a national party as a candidate from wherever you're from, but I have, and it is hard. It is really hard to go convince a donor that they should give to the national party when what they're invested in is you and your candidacy. The JFC allows you to go to your donor instead of saying, hey, I need $7,000 for my campaign and $5,000 for my leadership pack and $30,000 for the NRCC. Instead, you can go to them and say, hey, I need $50,000 and it's going to go into the Ashley Haycock Victory Fund. And they're going to say, oh, great. We love you. We want to support you. We have the resources for this. We want to make this kind of investment. And the JFC will take in that donation, pay whatever expenses are associated. So if you have a fundraiser, pay their commission. If you have, again, compliance people, attorneys, whatever, pay whatever necessary fees you have for the JFC. And then they're going to distribute that money out to the participants in the order that you most desire. So in this Victory Fund setup, it's filling your campaign bucket first, your leadership bucket second, and then the NRCC bucket third. The other beauty of this is the distribution of the funds is controlled by you. So when you are ready to distribute the funds, you don't have to send them out immediately. So thinking about those dues, if you were to say, hey, I'm going to raise all this money in the off year for the NRCC, but I don't want to send it until the election year when my dues are due. You can do that. You can raise it all in the non-election year and then distribute it when you're ready to the national or to the state party. So it's important to know that you do have control of that distribution timeline. If you're in a competitive seat, you can tap your donors for much larger amounts. So upwards of $300,000. Oh, someone's drawing on the slides. Is it just me that sees that? I don't know how to control that. I'm going to keep on going, but if somebody else knows how to control that, feel free to let me know. If you can tap your donors for upwards of $300,000, depending on the participating committees, and the funds that you raise through your JFC can help fund coordinated expenditures and buckets in order. So we're filling our campaign primary election bucket first, then our general election bucket, then our leadership PAC bucket, Then if we are trying to do exempt activities with that state party mail rate, we're filling the state party bucket. And then if we're doing coordinated expenditures or we're paying our dues, we're putting the NRCC in there. Now, the NRCC, I said $300,000, which is obviously more than all these add up to. The NRCC also has additional buckets, the legal bucket and the building bucket, the legal fund and the building fund. And the limit for those is $132,000, 132.9, I think. I've got the chart on the next page. So if you have all of those buckets pulled together into your JFC, that's where we get the upwards of $300,000 that you're able to raise. So if you have people with capacity, this is a really effective tool for taking advantage of their willingness to support you, and make sure that those funds are going where they need to go. So in the example of the exempt activities, you can think about the fact that that $500,000 mail budget becomes infinitely easier to raise for if you can raise it in $10,000 increments instead of $3,500 increments. So if I can go to donors and say, hey, you can give me 10 in the non-election year and 10 in the election year, and then I'm going to pay it out of my JFC when I get into campaign season, to the state party so that they can do their deal with their exempt activities, or to the NRCC to pay my dues or fund my coordinated expenditures. Raising it in those $10,000 increments is incredibly more effective than trying to raise it in small dollars. And again, like I mentioned, if you've got a donor who you're trying to persuade to support you, it's a lot easier sell for them to go and say, hey, I need you to support the Ashley Haycock Victory Fund, as opposed to, hey, I need you to support my state party or my national party, because what they're invested in is you. It's also a lot easier logistically, because when you are trying to go to a donor and raise money, if you're like, hey, click this link and give this much, and then click this link and then give that much. No donor I've ever worked with prefers that method. They want to go to one link, make one contribution, and then they want to have done their bit. And you want to be able, as the candidate, to make one ask. And so that this enables you to do this. And JFCs are also an incredibly creative, they can get really creative in terms of how people use them. We have seen JFCs that are set up for particular delegations within a state. They can be set up for a particular industry, if it's farming or manufacturing or all these different things. You know, we've seen them set up for that. We also had the privilege of working on what was the largest JFC to date, last cycle or cycle or two ago, and it contained, I want to say, upwards of 50 competitive candidates, as well as every single state party, as well as the national party, which meant that the max donation to that particular JFC was well over $1 million. And then what the beauty of that was that the money then funneled down. And so the folks that were running the JFC could go to their extremely high net worth individuals and say, hey, I'm trying to bring a majority to DC this cycle. I need $1 million, and I'm able to help the people who need those resources most. So keeping an eye on JFCs that you can participate in, that's another really valuable tool. If you know that these JFCs are out there and you build the relationships with the members or the folks that are running the JFC, that can be another source of basically income that just falls into your lap. And we saw, it was fun. We had a state party who had never had any success raising money, who last cycle participated in a JFC that was similar to that. And the JFC was able to dump several $1,000s into the state party, who was then able to turn around and use it on the ground and get members elected that they would never have been able to help before. So it really is a very powerful and creative tool. I will say that they are complex, and they do require a lot of sort of in-depth understanding of both the compliance aspects, the legal aspects, all of those things to set them up. You have to have a legal document called a joint fundraising agreement to set it up. And then the actual distribution, tracking and distribution of the funds down the waterfall is also can be a pretty complex process. So definitely something that is worth doing, but also definitely something that you should not try to manage yourself. Okay, so this is the contribution limits chart for the FEC this cycle. So just quickly how this works. Obviously, the donor is listed down the left and the recipient across the top. So if we were in person, I'd be standing there pointing at the little boxes for you, but just so that you can kind of see what's on here. So and how we stack those buckets up for the JFC. So an individual donor who is giving that $3,500 per election to your campaign committee, that's the $7,000. The $5,000 per year, those are those annual limits we talked about, to your PAC. The state party, which is that $10,000 per year. Now, you'll note it says on there state, district, local. This is a question I've gotten when I've done this presentation before, so I'll just jump in and say, county parties, if you work for a county party, you share limits with your state party. So that means that a donor who gives $10,000 to the state party cannot give you anything. So it's important to understand that that is a shared limit between the county party and the state. And then the national party, that 44.3, and then those other building and legal buckets, that 132.9, there are two of those 132.9 buckets. So you can imagine a scenario where your JFC stacks up all of these buckets, and then you can go to your donors and you can ask them for upwards of $300,000. And all of a sudden, offloading that mail program, paying for those coordinated expenditures, having a leadership PAC that can meaningfully build relationships and support other challengers, all becomes a lot more effective. And again, if you do not have donors that are giving you over the $7,000, fair enough. That is a lot of money. And my old boss used to say political giving is the most sacrificial giving you can do because it is not tax deductible. But if you have high net worth individuals on your donor list, you should be taking advantage of these resources and these tools because there are other ways to help build up those funds and maximize their capacity and their desire to support you. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about before we get into some questions. So in addition to sort of knowing who your high net worth individuals are, knowing your donors can help you get connected with corporate or non-connected PACs that are tied to companies or industries. So there are corporate and non-connected PACs for every industry you can possibly imagine. We've got car dealers and realtors and manufacturers and housing and builders and insurance agents and financial advisors and every sort of medical specialty under the sun, nurse anesthetists, radiologists, everybody. There are also companies that have political action committees tied to the companies. So Home Depot and Boeing and Caterpillar, along with a lot of smaller companies too that take advantage of setting up a political activity or a political action committee because they want to be engaged in the process meaningfully. So if you have donors or if you have industries or if you have companies that are located within your district, you should know that. Now, most of these non-connected or corporate PACs, they're not going to give to challengers, and they will almost certainly not give in a primary. However, if you have a donor who supports you who's a realtor, that realtor may be able to go to the realtor PAC and get a list of other realtors in the district and put on an event for you. And then when you get there, when you get to DC or you get elected, that's when the money from the PAC directly can start pouring into your campaign committee. But even when you're running, if you've got, like I said, a facility in your district or a particular industry that you're connected to, know that. Figure out who their PACs are, figure out who their representatives are, and maybe they can help build a network. Because in my experience fundraising, the most effective way to fundraise is to go to somebody who supports you and then ask them, who else do you know? And that's exactly what this is doing, is saying, hey, I've got a banker who I'm really close to. That banker can go to the American Bankers Association, and or a car dealer can go to the National Association of Car Dealers, and sort of build those networks, use those tools to build those networks, because they may have access to lists of people who support their PAC, who might be willing to sit down with you or come to a lunch with you or something like that. So it is an important resource to kind of know that is out there, even if it's not necessarily direct dollars from the PAC coming directly into your campaign committee. All right. Okay, so I have been talking a long time, but I'm sure there are questions. This is an incredibly complex topic. So I believe, Carla, are you going to help me navigate the questions for this?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashley. It was great.
I'll maybe jump in really quickly before you start answering them with some clarification on other entity types, just because I know this is a complex topic. So we talked about leadership PACs, joint fundraising committees, non-connected, and corporate PACs. We did not talk about super PACs, and we did not talk about 501c3, C4s, but those are entities that our company works with. And just so you know, when it comes to incorporating any of those types of entities into your JFC, you can't do it on the nonprofit side. You can do it on the super side, but only if your super is set up as a carry PAC, which is a hybrid PAC that has essentially two accounts. A hybrid PAC has an account that is specifically limited to contributing to other entities, and the limits to that are the same as a non-connected PAC, that $5,000 limit. And then the super that is sort of the other half of the committee can take that unlimited donations and all those kinds of things. So only the $5,000 portion of a super can go into a JFC.
All right, thank you, Ashley. So we have a first question. So, what is the best way to identify PACs and how do you reach out to them?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, know your donors, know your district. So let's say, and I'm not kidding when I say there is a PAC for every conceivable industry out there. So whatever industries you have, they have a PAC. So there's a couple of resources. First of all, the FEC website, which is just fec.gov, that has a searchable, is searchable for if you have a keyword like, you know, you have to be maybe a little creative, because let's say you were looking for the radiologists, you have to try radiology and then radiologists, so being sort of as fuzzy with your search terms as you can. That's one way. Open Secrets is another really valuable tool. They take all that FEC data and they make it searchable in kind of a different way, and they put some graphics together that can be useful as well. But honestly, I'm always amazed at how much information is available via the FEC website, because all of the donors and all that is publicly available information. Now, you are not allowed to use FEC data for fundraising. And what I mean by that is you cannot go to the FEC website, download someone's donor list, and then mail those people or solicit from them. So what you can do is use it for research purposes. So let's say you have a list of people that, are coming to an event for you. You should absolutely use FEC or Open Secrets to research, hey, who are these people? Have they given? Are they political donors? All of that. But you cannot just use the data as like a free list. So just be aware of that.
All right, thank you. So we have another question. It says, can PACs also endorse?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I would say yes, PACs absolutely do endorse sometimes. Generally speaking, they'll put out endorsed candidate lists. They may have a questionnaire you have to fill out, something like that. But the most effective way that PACs engage with the political system is by supporting candidates and engaging with their legislators that way. And so they may put on an event for you, or and there's a whole industry of fundraisers that are DC specific that raise and engage with these political action committees. So if and when it becomes relevant for you, if you're running at the federal level, engaging with the community in DC, it can really help to have a DC based fundraiser who has a lot of relationships established and may know who to talk to.
Great, Ashley, thank you. I have another, so there's another question. How do I know if there are GFCs in my area?
So yeah, that's a good question. Again, I think JFCs are really a vehicle for you to help raise for these other buckets. That's kind of the primary driver. When I say like participating in them, if you are in a very competitive district and you're going to a meeting with the party and they're saying, hey, we think you're the candidate from this area, great. Then you want to say, okay, what is leadership doing? Are there JFCs that are out there that are going to support my candidacy? There's a whole other type of entity that we didn't talk about called a nominee fund. A nominee fund is usually set up in order to support the nominee once they get through the primary. So the way that the nominee funds work is if I'm running in I'll use a random example, Texas 34. If I'm running in Texas 34 and I win my primary, donors can give to the Texas 34 nominee fund. And then the day that I win, all that money from that nominee fund comes directly into my campaign fund, providing that those donors have not already given to me directly. And so the nominee fund can be a very, it's not something that you set up for yourself, but it is something that's worth understanding if it is out there already. Because if you're running at the federal level in a competitive seat, there's probably a nominee fund out there.
Perfect, thank you. So we just got another recent question. Is Super PAC and the other types of PAC only used for federal office campaign, or what are the resources that can be used for state legislative office?
Yeah, good question. So as I said at the top, 50 states, 50 sets of rules. And they're all different. Now, a lot of states have similar vehicles available on the state side. So, they'll have whatever the equivalent of a super PAC. So I'll go back to Texas because they just had their primary a couple weeks ago. Texas has what's called a DCE committee. That is a direct campaign expenditure committee. A DCE committee is the equivalent of a federal super PAC. And so it's definitely worth researching your particular state. And if you are on the state side and you need state help, definitely you could engage with us. You can engage with someone else, but you should do the legal research to understand how to translate, I guess, for lack of a better word, these tools into your particular local context.
Great. And then we have also another one. Can you briefly expand to which 501(c)(3) can support candidates and policies?
Sure. So C3s, in order to keep their tax exempt status, have I think it's a 4951 rule. And I'm not an attorney, so none of this should be construed as legal advice. But my understanding and how they operate is they have 49% that they can do for political types of activities, and then 51 that has to be social welfare type of activities. And so there is the 501(c)(3), C4s that we work with have a very strict budgeting process. They also have a legal team engaged that is helping them keep that balance, because otherwise your tax exempt status can be in jeopardy. And so they're not giving directly to candidates. They're not giving, and the reason for that is on the federal level, corporate contributions are prohibited. And so, and that includes like pass-through type of corporate entities. So you can only give on the federal level if you are a human person or you are a federally registered PAC or if you are a company that is a sole proprietorship or a LLC that files as a sole proprietorship or partnership, you can give, but we still have to have your information. So we do this with our clients all the time, looking for what we call a non-corporate verification form, because I have to verify that there is no corporate money coming into these federal races. And so it's incredibly important to understand that is prohibited at the federal level, and that includes passing through from 501c3, C4s.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you again, Ashley, so much for this amazing presentation and for the questions. So, our next speaker is Lisa Elixker. She's a nationally recognized campaign finance expert with over 35 years of experience. She has conducted for over 15 presidential committees and works with hundreds of Republican Senate and House campaigns. She is the president of Huckabee Davis Lisker, and she also performs full compliance and financial reviews of corporate and trade association PACs. She will talk to us about compliance today. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us, and thank you. Yeah.
Well, hello, everybody. I hope everybody got a quick bite to eat. Oh, quick brief about myself. I've been doing campaign finance for almost 40 years. My first job out of college was working for the Bush Quayle 88 campaign, and I just kind of ended up in their treasury division, and that's where I ended up liking it a lot. So I stayed with the company, and now I'm the CEO and president of the company. So as Carla mentioned, we work on the Republican side. And we do full scale bookkeeping, accounting, public disclosure, all kinds of compliance for uh, presidential campaigns, Senate campaigns, House races, PACs, anything, party committees along those lines. As we go into the discussion, I just want you to keep in mind we're discussing things at the federal level. We do some state and non-federal work out of my office, but every state has its own set of campaign finance rules, and it's just too much material to cover right now in one session. So if I reference a certain rule or a certain law, it's at the federal level. If you're working at a state level or a local level, you're going to need to make sure that whatever you're working on, you are familiar with those campaign finance rules. There's a lot of similarities, but sometimes some states, are very lax about what they allow. There's not a lot of reporting. They take corporate money, that type of thing. And some states are really hard and harder than the FEC. One other thing I want you to think about, regardless of where you're thinking of working on a campaign or if you're thinking about running for office someday, compliance is really the one aspect that touches every part of your campaign, of any political committee. So, the media has rules about what can go out. Every kind of communication has rules. And of course, there's a public disclosure that shows where you're raising and spending your money. So there's rules associated with that. So even if this is not your area or something you think you want to be in someday, you should know enough to know when to ask and just have, enough knowledge so that if you're working in a certain area of the political world, that you know when you need to consult somebody to help you with the rules and the regulations. So we'll start with what a compliance team is. Generally, it's made up of one to many people. At the federal level, the treasurer is the head of the compliance team. And that's because the Federal Election Commission views the treasurer as the one that is responsible for all of the compliance and all of the public disclosure. When we file reports with the Federal Election Commission, we are verifying that we believe all the information in that specific report is complete and true. So if there are issues and complaints filed against any of these committees, we, as the treasurer, are the ones that receive them and are responsible for replying to them. An attorney might also be involved. We actually really enjoy when attorneys that specialize in campaign finance are working with our committees. They look at things differently. They're there to help in a lot of other areas. They can help at the business aspect, looking at contracts before committees are signing them. They review reports. They'll review a lot of times like super PACs or the PACs that are out there doing those big ads in support of or opposing different candidates. And there are rules about what those have to say. A lot of times attorneys review those before they go public just to make sure that they're meeting all the rules and requirements and it's not going to get a committee in trouble. And then many times a candidate's personal accountant might be involved. They're not necessarily doing things directly with the campaign, but if a candidate is personally funding any aspect of the campaign or making a loan to the campaign, then a lot of times the personal accountant would be responsible for communicating that information to me. Somebody is drawing on the presentation, so I'm not sure. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm not doing that. Um, hmm. Okay, so as I mentioned, the treasurer is the head of the compliance team, and we're responsible for a lot of different things. I mean, you're running a business when you're setting this up. So we're the head of the compliance team, and first and foremost, we're keeping your books and records in good order so that we can prepare for the public disclosure reports. So that means we're paying the bills, we're making your deposits of your contributions, we're tracking credit card payments and bills, we're tracking online platforms when money's coming in via credit card. So we're doing regular financial reporting because the team that's running the campaign needs to know how much money they have and what they have to spend. We work with them on budgeting and planning. All these different financial statements, which I'll reference in a moment. We're here to give compliance advice. So it may just be something as simple as a fundraising person is putting together a solicitation and they want us to review it and make sure it meets all the requirements. It could be related to a complicated travel arrangements that's being made by a candidate or a sitting member of Congress, and they have to divide up the cost between their official office, their campaign office, maybe their PAC, their political action committee, making sure that's taken care of. Uh, as I said, we bring all the money in. I mean, the fundraisers bring the money in, we count it and make sure that it's being tracked appropriately. We pay your bills. One of the big things we do when I mention maintaining sufficient funds in a campaign account, it's making sure that based on what needs to be spent, the committees know what they have. So if someone submits a bill to us and we know that there's not enough money in there to pay it, we're not going to pay it. And we have to keep them abreast of this information so that they're not overspending. They may tell us they have money coming and they want us to pay a bill, but we will not make payments if the money's not there. We can't ever make payments based on what might be coming in. And all this feeds into filing the disclosure reports that are, the public reviews to see where the money's coming from and where it's going. It's really a mantra in our firm. We don't want any news stories. So our goal is to be behind the scenes to make sure things run smoothly. And we don't want to create any problems for any of the political committees we work for. If they want to be in the news, it needs to be as a result of something they're doing. This is an example of a couple different reports that we might we might provide the committees with, just so they can keep track of their resources. And it's a typical business. I mean, like I said, these are just, if you were in a day-to-day small business, these are the types of reports that you would be providing if you were a CFO or an accounting person within there. They have a budget. We're trying to make them stay with it. Where's the money coming from? Is it meeting that they're how they budgeted for it? Is the direct mail performing as it should? Is the event money coming in? Things along those lines. It's really important that they're able to gauge what their burn rate is compared to what their receipts are. So here's some rules an attorney might fulfill in addition to just being there for additional support. These days, many committees are incorporating, and this is for liability purposes, as well as a number of other issues. Smaller campaigns a lot of times do not incorporate unless they happen to be in a state that just makes it very easy to sue them. So it comes down to what their risk level is. Definitely Senate races, most of the time they incorporate. Presidential races definitely incorporate. And a lot of party committees, sometimes super PACs incorporate. It just helps protect the people that are running the organization. Ballot access is super important. Our office is not responsible for ballot access. We are the numbers people. And we really have to remind committees about this because every state has different rules about how you get on the ballot. It could be as simple as writing a check. It could be that you need a certain number of signatures on a petition, or it can be a combination of both. So it's really important when you're getting started that you know what the rules are and what the deadlines are and how you reach those. Attorneys are very helpful with that because many times, especially if it's signatures, they will help review the petitions to make sure they're in good order. When a candidate files to run for office at the federal level, they're required to file a personal financial disclosure with House or Senate ethics. And it's normally due within about 30 days of when they register with the Federal Election Commission. This is not something that we as compliance people work on. We don't have insight into what their personal finances are. But many times an attorney will help them with it and will review it to make sure that everything is categorized correctly and that they're disclosing what they need to without putting too much information on the form. Campaigns have a lot of, and committees have a lot of complaints issued against them. It could be something as, that's directly from the Federal Election Commission. In that case, we may be responding prior to it getting to the attorney level. But many times it's just an outside person that decides to sue the campaign or file a complaint against the campaign for any number of reasons. It can be a contractual dispute. It could be an opposing person feels like something that was said in an ad was inaccurate, and they're filing a complaint against that. There are complaints that require an attorney level expertise to deal with to keep it out of court, just take care of it. There's tons of different materials that go out as a campaign. It can be, like I said, it can be online media, it can be texts, it can be swag, it can be bumper stickers, billboards, yard signs, all types of things like that. Many times the attorneys review, especially ads, digital ads or TV ads, to make sure that the content is good and that the appropriate disclaimers are there. There can be legal guidance necessary just for running a business. If you have a contract that needs to be signed or you're running a large venue for something, anything along those lines, attorneys are really good to have their feedback on to make sure you're not signing something that's going to get you in trouble later. And then we are always very appreciative if an attorney that's working with the campaign will also review the public disclosure reports before they're filed, because many times they find things that we as compliance people are focused on one aspect, attorneys might be looking somewhere else, and then, communications people are looking somewhere else. But we always like having an attorney sign off before things are filed. And then, as I mentioned before, the personal accountant would normally be helping with the personal financial disclosure, and then any kind of candidate loans or contributions that are coming to the campaign. One thing to keep in mind with these personal financial disclosures, they need to be filed. If they're missed, the fine is not large, but it can be embarrassing to the candidate. And another thing to keep in mind is if a candidate is going to loan or give money to his or her own campaign, they need to make sure that their personal financial disclosure that's also public is reflecting that they have the funds available to make the loan or the contribution that they make. It's a very easy way to get tripped up if the numbers don't match. It becomes apparent that a candidate might be getting money from an outside source, and that's not permitted. How do you start a campaign? It's actually pretty simple to file the initial forms. If you know what you're doing, you can be up and running in about 15, 20 minutes. You have to have a name, and if it's a federal campaign, it has to have the candidate's name in it. So it can be the candidate's just their first name, like Elise for Congress was Elise Stefanik when she was running, but it has to have their name in it somewhere. You have to have an address, which can be a P.O. box. You do not have to have a website or a web address, but it's recommended. It goes on the public disclosure, and people do know to look for it. So if outside people are giving money, many times they'll look you up on the Federal Election Commission website, see where to mail a check, or want to be able to reference your website. And you'll have to have a web address if you're going to be raising money digitally. You have to have a bank account. You don't have to have more than one bank account. You will cross that bridge down the road too, but you have to have an account that's separate from any personal account you have or any other business account you have in order just for your campaign or political committee. It cannot be, the funds cannot be commingled with anything else. At the federal level, you have to have a treasurer. We also recommend having an assistant treasurer. That person is then able to perform in the event the treasurer is not available. So it's good to have a backup person listed. At the federal level, you're not required to have a chairperson, but many states require the chairperson. And some states make the chairperson the one that's responsible. Some states make the candidate the one that's, responsible if there are issues. But in most cases, it's the treasurer that's responsible for all the compliance and the public disclosure. In order to open a bank account, you have to have a tax ID from the IRS. So this is, your Social Security is your personal tax ID. Every business has its own tax ID as well, and this is setting up a business. So one thing I emphasize over and over again when I go through these classes is never, ever, ever use your personal Social Security number or the candidate's personal Social Security number to open a bank account. You will have to list it if you're signing on the account, but the account needs to have its own tax ID. And you can get this on the IRS website in about 15 minutes. It's all online. You can get it online the same day. So just keep that in mind. If your tax ID, your social security number ever gets listed as the company's social security number, it can put you at a tax liability for all the money that comes into that account. And you certainly don't want that to happen. You need to open a bank account. And if you're going to have online fundraising, it links to your bank account. You have to go to the various platforms and get that set up as well. The ones that the Republicans tend to use the most right now are Antidote and WinRed. There are some other ones out there. Public Square is a newer one that people are using. But this is a way for people to be able to make online donations or give via credit card. And it doesn't create a problem with the committee having to have its own merchant IDs, like directly with MasterCard, Visa, American Express. You have to file a statement of organization with the Federal Election Commission, which has just a few pieces of information as listed on this form. And you have to file a statement of candidacy if you're a candidate committee. And that's done online. There's no wet signatures. It's all done right online, and you get your filing ID the moment that you file it with the Federal Election Commission. Once you file with the Federal Election Commission, you're official and you're subject to all the reporting requirements and the legal requirements that are set up for your committee. Non-federal offices, again, are going to have similar things they have to file, but every state has its own rules about the order that you file in. Some states still require paper, some do it online. So you just have to know what the rules are and which you have to have in place before you get going. We talked about the personal financial disclosure. Again, this is the candidate's responsibility to do, whether or not they have their accountant helping them or not. But you have to file within 30 days, either with House or Senate ethics, 30 days of registering with the Federal Election Commission. You can get an extension sometimes, but the latest you can file is 30 days before your primary date. A lot of the state offices have the same rules, but again, it's different in every state, so you'll have to check depending on your state's rules. All right, let's talk about banking. There are many different avenues to take here, but the bottom line is you have to at least have a checking account. Most smaller committees or most regular sized committees can just operate with one bank account. But if you're taking in money from a lot of different sources, if you have one of those committees, if you have a Senate race, a presidential race, you're going to have multiple bank accounts. So you may end up setting something up that is just for your direct mail receipts or just for your online receipts. You may have one account set up that you pay all of your bills out of one account. So you know that no other debits are going to be showing up out of your other bank accounts. The key is that you need to have access to them all, and you need to be really careful about who else has access to them all. There's a lot of fraud these days, and the more bank accounts you have, the more you have to track and be checking regularly to make sure you're not having issues. If you're not reconciling on a regular basis and any kind of fraud hits your account, if the bank is not notified in a timely manner, they're not going to help you retrieve those funds, and they're not going to take any responsibility for it. So it's just things you really have to watch out for. Can you have an interest-bearing account? The answer is yes, but because campaign contributions to political committees are not taxed by the IRS, any other income earned by these political committees is taxed. So if you earn interest or you sell any kind of asset of your committee, you're going to have to file a Form 1120 POL with the IRS on an annual basis, and you're subject to 21% income tax on whatever the other income is. So because interest rates have been so high these last several years, many committees have gone ahead and established interest-bearing accounts because what they're earning far outweighs what the payment of the taxes. But again, just something to consider and be aware of. And if you do have an interest-bearing account, you need to be sure you're saving money to pay that tax just in the event that you're running a very tight campaign and spending every dime to get up to election day. As all of you know, it's really impossible to operate in today's world without a debit or a credit card. So, a lot of times when you set up with a bank, it's pretty easy to get a debit card. It can take more time to get a credit card, especially for a campaign committee. But the things to remember are, number one, be really careful about who has access to these in your group. This is a person who you're giving responsibility to make spending decisions without any other kind of approvals. As treasurer, we're getting requests to pay bills. If somebody in your team is using a debit or credit card, they're just paying the bills and we don't find out about it until after the fact. So keep that in mind. Debit card takes money right out of your bank account, so it's something that needs to be tracked very closely to make sure, again, you don't have any fraudulent situations going on. And then credit cards, as you know, you charge them for a month and then a payment is due basically monthly. You have to disclose all the individual payments that the credit card makes. So you can't just write Visa credit card payment on your public disclosure. You have to list every vendor that credit card also paid. So it's really important, again, that records are being kept on what the money is being spent for, that the vendors that are being paid by the credit card, you have the full information on. You're going to have their addresses, the dates of the purchases and what they're for. Crypto is another thing that many committees are interested in accepting these days. The Federal Election Commission does permit committees to take crypto contributions, but you cannot use a crypto account to conduct campaign business from. So if you have a group that is interested in accepting crypto, you can set up a crypto account, but it needs to be one of those that basically converts the money as soon as it comes in to regular cash and moves it over to your bank account. And that prevents you from experiencing either a big loss because you're not holding on to the crypto and the market goes crazy, or a big gain in which you might have a tax event. I mentioned online fundraising platforms before. This is, again, what people do now. Committees are not taking credit cards and those types of payments directly like you would, when you go into a store and use your credit card to pay. Committees are using online platforms and providing donors with links or access through their website so people can give independently. And it's really a good thing. I mean, the platforms take a fee out, but it keeps the campaign from having to do all kinds of different extra compliance that's related to having your own merchant number. And then, like I discussed, fraud. There's two types of fraud that we're seeing a lot of these days. One is check washing. Campaigns and political committees are still pretty paper heavy, especially political committees that make contributions to other political committees. They really like the idea of handing checks out. So, what can happen is issue a bunch of checks. It gets mailed out to the recipients. Sometimes the mail is compromised, checks are stolen, and then the bad actor washes the check, changes the payee, changes the amount, and it clears the account because it's got your signature on it. So that's another reason you need to be monitoring your bank accounts regularly so you can identify if you have any kind of fraudulent check come through. If you're able to identify it quickly, the bank usually refunds any loss that you have. But if it goes months and months, you're not going to see the money again. And it's almost impossible to catch the person who's doing it. The other type of fraud is wire fraud. And what happens is we pay a lot of large bills. We get requests for wires that are multiple millions of dollars because people are making media buys and so forth, or paying for postage for direct mail programs. If anything is compromised and we as the payment people receive false wire instructions, and send the wire to the wrong person, the money's gone. It is almost impossible to get back. Banks move very slowly when any kind of fraud like this is disclosed. And by the time anything happens with it, the money's moved 15 times. So it's gone. So we have a hard and fast rule that anytime we receive a request from a vendor or from anybody to wire money, we have to verbally confirm the instructions the first time we wire to that vendor. If any vendor attempts to change their wire instructions, we go through the verification process again. And that's what happens is emails get compromised. Somebody gets hold of your email, sends a fraudulent request for money with new wire instructions, and then they intercept the payments. And sometimes days can go by before anybody knows because the vendor finally says, I never got my payment, and then they realize something went to the wrong place. So I'm not sure what materials you all have, but there are limits on what you can take in and what you can spend as a campaign committee, and they change every couple of years. So I won't go through every detailed one, but as it stands now, an individual can give up to $3,500 to the primary and $3,500 to the general of any federal candidate committee. Some candidate committees have extra elections too. Like in Georgia, they just had a special general for Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat. That went to a runoff. So the runoff is an extra limit. Another $3,500 can go just specifically to that election. So there are sometimes candidates that may have four elections in a race if they have a primary, a runoff, a general, and a runoff. And that's a state specific thing, whether or not they allow for runoffs. So that's the limit now. The limit, individual limits are change every 2 years based on cost of living increases. So sometime in January of next year, maybe early February, the Federal Election Commission will put out what the cost of living change is for the next cycle. And it usually goes up somewhere between $100 to $300 or $400 a cycle in what an individual can give. PACs are limited. This is not indexed for inflation, and as of now, most PACs can give up to $5,000 per election cycle. And then there are other types of things that, groups that can give. A non-federal committee can give money if it meets certain requirements. The limits are very low. Candidate committees can give to other candidate committees. That's a $2,000 limit. And then party committees have a whole separate limit too. So all of these limits are on the Federal Election Commission website. There's a whole chart, and they publish a new one every cycle as different things change. There are also prohibited contributions, federal campaigns, and this is not super PACs, but any kind of federal campaign PAC party committee cannot accept money from foreign nationals and cannot accept money from incorporated sources. Those are the two main ones. Also, government contractors are not permitted to give contributions to federal candidates. And that doesn't mean if you work for Boeing, you can't give as an individual. But if you personally have a business, or you personally, maybe you're a computer contractor or something for like the Department of State, you're not permitted to give money to federal candidates. Super PACs, it's kind of a wild world. Wild Wild West, they can take money from a lot of different sources, no foreign money. That's still not permissible in any federal type committee. But super PACs or independent expenditure PACs are able to they are not permitted to give directly to any other candidate committee, but they can do independent expenditures in support of or opposing candidates. They can take unlimited contributions and they can take corporate money. So when you hear about these super PACs, I mean, there can be donors, you hear about Elon Musk has a super PAC he gives to. He funds these PACs with millions and millions of his own dollars or money from his corporations, and then he can direct these PACs to do ads opposing or supporting candidates that he would like to see elected. And anyone can set one up, but there are reporting requirements for those as well. There are different things you can do. It's called exempt, and it's things you can do to support candidates that don't go against your giving limit. One thing would be an individual can host a meet and greet or a fundraising event in their home. It has to be their primary residence, and spend up to $1,000 a cycle for that. So if a couple does it, they could spend $2,000 for it. You could travel if you wanted to travel and help a candidate at an event. You could spend $1,000 of your own money to travel per election, and it's not reportable as any kind of contribution to that particular committee. It's an honor system. It's not reportable. It's just really the high dollar donors are aware of this, and the high dollar fundraisers are aware of it and know how to work with their people to make sure that any donor who wants to do the most that they possibly can is exploring all these different options. There's in-kind contributions. An in-kind is a gift of a good or service as opposed to a gift of money or cash. So if I wanted to host an event in my home, I could spend $1,000 toward catering and invitations, that type of thing, without it being counting toward the candidate's limit. I could also then decide I want to pay for anything over $1,000. As long as I haven't donated, I could in-kind up to $3,500. So an in-kind does go against your limit, but it allows you to absorb a cost for something. And instead of being reimbursed for it by the campaign, you can just pay for it, and it becomes your contribution through an in-kind. On the disbursement side, the main prohibition is there's no personal use of these funds. So gym memberships, wardrobes, family travel that's not directly related to their campaign. Campaigns cannot pay for that. The expenses are to be paid for the purpose of the election and getting the candidate elected. Same on the PACs. PACs have a little more flexibility, but really the main reason for a regular PAC is to support other candidates. So the lion's share of the funds that come into a political action committee should really be spent in making donations to other committees. And then disclaimers, mentioned these a couple times. Every solicitation has to have specific disclaimers on it, and it's very easy to miss these and have a complaint filed against you by anyone that gets one and realizes something is missing. So you have to have a statement that indicates that contributions to committees are not tax deductible for income tax purposes. It has to basically tell you that if you give over $200, you are going to be itemized on a filing, and it requests your full name, address, employer, and occupation, and it lets you know who paid for it. So if you do get a solicitation and it's asking you to give money to a certain thing, you can look in the page and make sure that you're actually giving to the actual committee that supports that. It's not some outside group that maybe is raising money in support of or opposing somebody. You're actually giving to the campaign committee. One thing you really want to do when you get started, know your deadlines. So get a calendar out, make sure that you know not only what your public disclosure deadlines are, but you know your ballot access, your any kind of filings that you have with your state ethics or your the federal to make sure you're on the ballot, meeting all those other requirements. But just put them on a calendar and know not only when you want to know when the report closes and when it's due. So generally candidate committees file quarterly with the Federal Election Commission. So we're getting ready to close a quarter right now, March 31st, and everybody will have a report due on April 15th. There's also reports due, a lot of extra reports due this year because it's an election year. There's pre-primary reports, there's pre-general reports in October, post-election reports in November, and then year end. So we have 2 extra reports for every candidate committee if you're in cycle and running this year. If you have runoffs, you're going to have extra filings for that too. As a candidate committee, as you're leading up to your primary, your report closes a couple weeks out from your primary and you file a pre-primary report. So we just had a few that we're doing in February for March primaries. There's a number of primaries coming up in May, so we'll have a lot of extra reports then. But once your report closes as a candidate committee, if you receive contributions or loans from your candidate of $1,000 or more, you have to disclose that online with the Federal Election Commission within 48 hours of receipt. So there's ongoing filings throughout the year as these types of contributions come in. October is kind of a nightmare because everybody's filing pre-general reports, you know, when they're in the general. So we're basically filing 48-hour notices, you know, daily because something's going on with clients every day that need to be disclosed. And that's what a late contribution notice is. So do a master calendar, make sure you know your schedule, make sure you know your state's filing schedule. If you're at the local level, sometimes you have local and state filing schedules. It's really important to note these and make sure you don't miss them. Report dates don't change at the federal level. We're not like the IRS. The Federal Election Commission isn't. So if your report, if the 15th of April is on a Sunday, the reports are due on Sunday. It's not like the IRS where your taxes would be due on Monday the 16th. You don't get any of that. So there's no extensions ever granted for anything along those lines. And then in addition to your regular public disclosure, you may have as an employer and as a company have disclosures where you're filing your W-2s if you have anybody, you know, on payroll. You're filing 1099s for your contract labor. These are all tax things that were due on it was due February 2nd this time because of the holidays. And then again, if you're earning interest or other income, you're going to have to file the 1120 POL and pay income tax by April 15th every year for the previous year. April's a fun month because, you know, we're all dealing with our own income taxes. We're dealing with our company's taxes. We're dealing with FEC reports. We're dealing with 1120 POLs. So there's a lot going on in April. So a finance consultant, fundraising person, I think you guys kind of went through this just with the last speaker, but these are really the people that are bringing the money in. And we as compliance people work very closely with these people because we're working together to make sure that the committee has everything it needs. So they're bringing the money in, we're keeping track of it, and then we're depending on the fundraising team to also help us with donor information to make sure we have everything needed when we file our public disclosure. They help us, people that give over their giving limit have ways to move money to future elections or maybe to a spouse. Many times the finance consultant has relationships with these high dollar donors and they're able to help us get these forms in within the time period that's required so that we don't have to issue refunds. But these are the people that are, they're doing event planning. They're projecting how much money they're going to be able to raise each month to help fund the campaign, and budgets are being done based on these projections. So one thing we're doing very, regularly is working closely with the fundraisers. When we do financials, they're actuals. This is what money you've had come in. This is what money you've spent. This is what you have available. Fundraising people are saying, this is what's still coming. This is what's in the pipeline. I know we're going to have this by a certain time. So we're making sure that we're working with the fundraising people so that we're not double counting money or missing money anywhere for things that are in the pipeline. And that helps the people that are making the decisions about where to spend the money and what types of things they can do to get the candidate elected, lets them know what resources they have. One other thing we do many times with fundraising teams that are maybe newer or starting, haven't done a lot of federal fundraising before, we'll train them on how to raise money, the legal aspects of it, what disclaimers they need, what they can take, how often we have to have checks sent to us, anything along those lines that helps them when they and their team are trying to solicit funds from other people. Couple other things to consider when you're getting set up. It's very exciting when anybody wants to run for office. They just want to get in, and then you have to step back and think about all the things that you need to do in order to make it work. So again, this is just like starting a business, right? You might decide you have the greatest product or greatest service out there and you want to plunge in and get going, but you need to take a minute and just get the bare minimum set up so that once you get started, you have a framework. So first thing is, figure out how to fund the campaign. If any of you are running for office, working on a campaign, these are the conversations you need to be having with the potential candidate. How are you going to get started? As a campaign person, as a candidate, if you don't have, some friends and family that are going to be able to get you your first chunk of money, it's going to be a really hard start. You need to have some group of people that are going to give you money as soon as you get filed. The online fundraising platforms we discussed before, most of them don't cost anything to have. They only cost money once you have a contribution come through them. So you want to pick the ones that are going to work best for your setup and make sure they're in place as soon as you're getting filed so that you have a link in your website and you're able to take online money as soon as people are willing to, excited about hearing you run and want to be able to give easily. Join fundraising committees. So this is an animal that's set up with the Federal Election Commission. It allows a group of different committees, different political committees, to come together and raise money for all of their different committees at one time. In order to do it, you have to form yet another committee, and it's a joint fundraising committee that has a separate tax ID, separate filing with the FEC. It has an agreement between all the participants saying, this is how we're going to raise money, this is how we're going to spend money, and this is how we're going to distribute it to all the participants. So many committees, most federal committees have these set up, federal candidates do, where they have a committee that's set up just to raise money for them, maybe their own leadership PAC, as well as maybe a party committee. And it allows those high dollar donors to come in and write a $50,000 check to one entity and then just have it filter to all the right places. So it's a separate way of keeping track of it, but it's permissible and it's a pretty good vehicle for those committees that are able to bring in some high dollar money. You're going to need some kind of software to file your reports. You have to file electronically with the Federal Election Commission. So a lot of campaigns use a free filing software that you can download from the FEC website. It's called FEC File. It is not a database. It is purely something that is a way for you to put your information into it, produce the report, and upload the report electronically to the Federal Election Commission. You cannot use it to track donor aggregates. You cannot pull out a list to do thank yous. It's nothing along those lines. It's just a reporting software. So it's there to use, and many committees use it, especially smaller ones that just don't want to spend the money, additional money on a software product. If you have a bigger campaign, you're tracking a lot of donors, you're really going to want a database type software. And so there are different ones out there. There's Crimson, there's ISP, there's Aristotle, and several others. And they cost anywhere, from $250 and up per month. Larger campaigns may pay $5,000, $6,000 a month for these softwares. But they're true databases. And if you have a big team and a lot of different people working on your campaign, it gives everybody access to it, allows people to, see where donors are and track histories and know who to solicit, pull lists, do thank yous, track how much things are coming in for events. And it also allows the compliance people to put all the information in and file the reports regularly. Accounting software. That's a separate software, and generally it's pretty simplistic accounting for campaigns. You don't have a lot of things you're dealing with that you would on a business where you have a lot of assets and depreciation, all that type of thing. Most of us use just like a QuickBooks type product, which is almost like a fancy checking account. And it's pretty simplistic software. It's not super expensive, but that's where we really keep the financials and produce the financials. And then the information goes into the filing software, and you reconcile all your bank accounts and so forth and keep track of all your money in, money out on the accounting software. When you get ready to file a disclosure report, the numbers should match. And that's how you're double checking that all of your information is accurate on your public disclosure. Think about who on your staff is going to be authorized to spend money and also to collect money. You want trustworthy people, people that are going to follow the rules and that you can be sure are going to get the information to you that you need. You've got payroll versus contract labor. So payroll is like any of you have a normal job. You go to work every day, your paycheck, it's got taxes taken out. That's when you get a W-2 at the end of the year. And then you got contract labor, and that would be just an individual who maybe does gig work, has a lot of different people they work for, and they're just getting a check from different resources or different sources all the time, and they're filing and paying their own taxes. So historically, campaigns have really utilized contract labor because they're a short-term entity and they don't want to go through the hassle of getting set up with tax IDs and so forth with states to have to withhold and pay taxes. And that's permissible by the Federal Election Commission, but it's not always permissible by labor laws. So you really need to be careful about who on your campaign staff is working in what capacity. And these days, more and more campaigns, are going to have an actual payroll where you're withholding taxes and paying taxes into the state government. And you can certainly use professional groups to do that. We don't do our own. We use like an ADP or a Paychex or Gusto, or there's several other groups out there that will help you get set up and actually do everything you need to run payroll. But you don't want to run afoul of labor laws. And larger campaigns these days, especially Senate races, because they're 6-year cycles, they offer health insurance and sometimes other types of benefits to employees because sometimes they have employees that are there several years. So different things to think about. And then, of course, insurance. Uh, if you are going to be a group that's renting venues or doing a lot of travel, or you're incorporated and have directors and officers, there's all kinds of liability insurances out there. And there are insurance companies that specialize in packages for campaigns and political committees. If you're not going to be able to afford the software or a QuickBooks type setup, you need some way to track things. So whether it's spreadsheets or some other way that you come up with it, you need to be tracking and reconciling your bank account regularly, and you have to be tracking your contributions in and your donor aggregates. If someone gives too much money, you have to refund that money or deal with the excessive portion within the allotted time by the FEC, or you could be penalized and fined for keeping money that you're not allowed to have. Exploratory committee, I'll just briefly mention what it is. They aren't utilized too much anymore. It allows an individual who's interested in running for office but doesn't want to officially file with the Federal Election Commission to establish a committee that's registered with the Internal Revenue Service. And you basically can go out there and raise money and spend money. You can't accumulate it, but you can raise it and spend it to decide whether or not you run for office. But you do have to file reports of your receipts and expenditures with the IRS. If you then decide to run for office, you convert it to a regular campaign committee. You have to file with the Federal Election Commission. You have to file all of your expenses and receipts that you already filed with the IRS, and then you have to try to terminate your filing requirement with the IRS. So it's a lot of steps to go through, but sometimes it is effectively utilized and it's not a bad idea. J.D. Vance did this when he ran for Senate the first time I'm his treasurer, and they really effectively used it, allowed him to set up, raise money early, and be ready to go when he was ready to file papers and run for Senate. He already had a chunk of money that he had raised as a result of his exploratory committee. But you really want to understand what you're doing. And if you go down this path, you definitely want an attorney who is an expert in campaign finance laws to help you through the process so you don't miss a filing. Do's and don'ts. Kind of talked about this. It's really, really important to get organized. So again, you're very excited when you're getting started. You have all these ideas about what you want to do, but take time to sit down, just do some initial planning. This is going to be a working document. It's going to change as you get going and you realize you need different stuff, but set up your campaign structure, do an initial budget. If you have no idea what you need to raise or spend for whatever mission you're trying to accomplish, whether it's a campaign or a PAC or a super PAC, go on the FEC website or go on your local or state campaign finance websites and look up reporting and public disclosure reports for anyone that's run for your seat before. And see what they raised and spent. You get an idea of whoever won it before, what they had to do. So at least gives you an initial starting spot. Uh, don't open a campaign bank account with your personal tax ID, which is your social security number. Reminder, you have to get a tax ID from the IRS. If you can hear that, it's my dog howling, and I apologize. But you have to get a tax ID from the IRS in order to open a bank account. You should be able to contact your local party and your state party and even the federal parties, if you know the national party committees, if you're running at that level, for resources. That is what their job is to help give you that information. So they may be able to refer consultants to you. They may be able to give you just a starting point or a how-to for whatever office you're thinking about running for. Be sure that you understand when you're hiring a consultant what they're doing and what their contracts say. Really good consultants that work with campaigns and political committees always have an out, a 30-day out or some sort of out on their contracts because campaigns might end early or committees might close down because they don't have money. So you want to make sure you're not committing your campaign or your committee to pay a consultant for a year or so if you're not going to have the money to do it. Don't start raising or spending money until you've got your bank account and your structure set up. The easiest way to lose information and not have what you need when it's time to file reports is if you just started taking money in and then plunked it all in a bank as soon as you got an account open and there's no structure set up in how you're tracking things. And again, don't assume you can do it all. You need somebody. If this is your first time out and you don't have the money to pay for these resources, you need to have somebody that is like your kitchen cabinet, somebody that you can talk to, bounce ideas off of, just be there to support you. And again, the party committees, there are groups out there that work with campaigns and committees to just get them started and give them ideas of what to do so they don't get themselves in trouble at the beginning. And then these are your stumbling blocks. You know, it's something as so stupid as not filing your initial paperwork correctly. It can be a typo on the paperwork, which is so embarrassing. It can be putting the wrong address, putting the wrong website. You can always amend it, but once you have it there, it's there for everybody to see. Make sure you pick the right software if you're going to use it. It's expensive and you don't want to spend money you don't need to spend. One thing that groups do sometimes is they hire a professional for a job, but they're not hiring a campaign professional. So you might hire an attorney, but it's some attorney that doesn't do anything with campaigns, and then they're really not the expert that you need. Same thing with, a fundraiser. A fundraiser that works with nonprofits may not be somebody who can do political work. So just keep that in mind. It can be hard to find the right talent, but it's worth your time to really look for it. You want to make sure you have volunteers, a finance team that's going to help you raise money. You really need to assess your ability to raise money and how you're going to fund things. So if you realize it's going to be hard to raise it, are you prepared to put your own money into a campaign? And then it's really easy to miss dates and deadlines if you're not keeping track of it. So again, it's hard to do it all because you can't be the candidate, the person raising the money, the person paying the bills, and the person filing the reports and do it all effectively. You really, really need to have somebody helping you track all this information. And that's it. So I don't know if people have questions or you have any other items you'd like to cover. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa, for this great presentation. If we can take questions, we do still have some time. So you can, again, drop them off in a chat and then we can read them. All right, we can start with the first one. So, who do you use to insure yourself as a treasurer, and what software do you use for accounting/bookkeeping?
So for accounting/bookkeeping, we generally use QuickBooks products, and there are different levels of them. So there's an online version that tends to be more expensive, but it's helpful if you've got a lot of different people from different areas that need to be able to log on and see the books at one time. We use the desktop version of QuickBooks Enterprise because that helps us have it, multiple people can have access. It's a pretty simplistic software. There are other ones out there. There's one called Zero that I've seen before that I don't use because I've always used QuickBooks, but that's the main one. For filing reports, it's going to be, generally an Aristotle product or Crimson, which is owned by CMDI. And ISP is another one that we've used. And then for personal insurance, we are very fortunate in our building. We have an insurance company that actually has political packages. So we not only, as my company, we have insurance to cover us for various things, but based on the committees we're working with, they will help us get general liability insurance for campaigns. They'll help us get media insurance many times. There can be insurance related specifically to cyber insurance or fraud. There's all types of things out there. Some committees don't have the money to pay for a large general liability package, but they have to have event insurance if they're, renting out a venue. You can get packages through this group to do that. So they're in my building. If you really wanted their contact information, just shoot me an email and I'll put you in touch with them. And I know there are other groups out there that do it too, so I can also put a couple other names in there for you.
All right, great. Let me take another one. So, someone asked, can you describe fee levels for campaign advisors generally?
It's key levels, it said.
No, it says fee levels for campaign
Fee levels. I'm
advisors.
sorry,
Yes.
I couldn't hear fee levels. Well,
No
that's
worries.
it's a hard thing to answer because it's going to depend on the type of campaign you are. So if you're a first time candidate out of the chute and you're running for, let's keep it at the federal level at House, your fees as a general consultant, if you're the general consultant, are going to be much lower than if you're working for somebody that's running as a senator for a reelection because the money's going to be different and the job load's going to be different. So general consultants can be paid hourly, but generally they're paid on a retainer and it's anywhere from, $1,500, $2,000 a month and up. Some GCs are paid 10, 15, $20,000 a month, depending, if you're working at the presidential level, you're going to be making a lot more than that. House and the state and local level, again, it's going to drop down based on the size of the campaign and what the budget is. But that's general for that. Fundraisers tend to work. They either get a flat fee or most of them work on commission, and many times are earning about 10, 12% of what they raise. So if you hire a fundraiser that's working on commission, you're just going to want to make sure that you've established what they're able to charge commission on. Do they have to be directly touching the contributions that they're bringing in, or are they getting it on everything that comes in? So make sure you've set the rules up for that.
Perfect. So we have another one. It says, which online platform do you recommend for online donations and why?
So it's probably because we've used them for so long. Antidote's been around the longest. They don't just specifically cater to Republicans. They cater to a lot of nonprofits and everything too, but they're very easy to use. And it's just a straight online fundraising platform. WinRed is the one that was set up to be the answer to the Democrats' version of Act Blue. And it's a little bit more complicated to set up, but most Republican candidates use WinRed. And part of that is because the party really pushes that. Again, it doesn't cost anything, and the fees are similar that they charge on, as a percentage of what you're raising. So there's not a big discrepancy there between the two. Most of my committees have both set up for different purposes. And then a newer one this year is Public Square, and that's a similar platform to WinRed. But again, that's the one that I think Donald Trump Jr. is involved with. But similar deal, you just go online and you fill out the applications, and in order to do it, you have to already have your bank account, your tax ID, and it's helpful if you've already registered your committee and have a committee ID, and they have support to help you walk through it. But once you use them a couple times, they're pretty easy to use.
Thank you, Lisa. We have another one that says, can the party cover insurance on a rented venue for a meet and greet outside of the office?
Can a party for their own? for their own meet and greet.
I can
Oh,
read it. Yeah.
are you
Can the
ready to get?
party cover insurance on a rented venue for a meet and greet outside of the office?
Yes. There you go.
Let me go through the questions. So, um, let me see. Yeah, you said that there was a training in learning to know what contributions you can take and what is legal or illegal. How can that be found, or can it be a training you can sign up for?
So it depends. If you're talking at the federal level, you need to go on the FEC website. It's just fec.gov, I believe. And there's a section there that's help for candidates and committees. They have manuals that are pretty, they make them more simplistic than trying to read the actual code. I would start with that and then also look at what the FEC offers. They have different seminars they teach for specific things that you're asking about. Party committees a lot of times are hosting different events that don't cost anything, to help candidates and professionals learn how to do things. And then there are other outside organizations, different nonprofit organizations that do a lot of support for groups working in political committees. You just have to do some research and find them. But the place to start at the federal level is going to be the FEC website and look. And then it would be the same thing if you're at the state level, go on your state compliance website and see they usually have a section that's like facts or a manual of the do's and don'ts of what you can raise. Some states are better than others.
All right, perfect, Lisa. Well, thank you again very much for this great lecture. Thank you so much again. Yeah. Continue with our next guest. So it's going to be our final speaker is Carlisle Gregory. He served as special assistant for political affairs under President Reagan. In 1989, he founded the Carla Gregory Company, a political consulting firm. He has worked for numerous congressional campaigns, and from 1981 to 1985, he has served as a field director for the NRCC and the first president of the American Campaign Academy. And today he will talk to us about building a campaign finance budget. There you go.
We're talking about campaign finance planning, which is like nobody's favorite subject, except maybe mine. So let's see here. I like to use cartoons, so take it you don't want to talk. Well, a lot of people don't want to talk about campaign finance planning, but we're going to have to. Good news is that anybody can do this. I got another cartoon on that. It says, "Oh, darling, your very first patient," which I think is kind of funny. My dad was a dentist, so I always wondered about his first patient too. I bet that was exciting. Yeah, we're going to talk about campaign finance planning, and I want to talk about some things and get them out of the way first before we go on and talk about exactly how to do this. I'm a big believer in showing exactly how to do stuff and giving you lists and rules to follow. So you're going to get a bunch of those. Our friend General John Pershing said, "Infantry wins battles, logistics wins wars." That doesn't really fit politics, but yes, it does, because logistics, by which we mean resources and the application and use of resources, does win campaigns. You have to have money, you have to have people, you have to have resources to win a campaign. So Pershing's right about that. You can have great ideas, you can have a great candidate, you can have great TV ideas and great polling, but you can't win if you can't deliver, steel on contact. So we're going to be talking about some of that stuff, and the reason why we have a budget and why we have a plan. Why have one? Well, I'll give you the answers. Your budget's your itinerary, what you're going to do and where you're going to do it. Your finance plan is your roadmap. Your cash flow is your gas, to overextend the metaphor, and without these things, you're stalled and going nowhere. I've got some other ones too. But let me get this one first. In preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Dwight D. Eisenhower. So you're going to say, why should I have a plan? Because we're going to change it. Well, that's true. You are. Things will change. Life happens. Your candidate does something great. Donald Trump does something bad. Donald Trump does something good. One of your big donors dies. Things happen. That's just the way it is. But you've got to be prepared. You got to have a battle plan so that you can change the battle plan. If you have no plan at all, you're just wandering around. And what Eisenhower was saying here is also true, that is that the planning process itself forces you to make decisions, to do things, to make decisions about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. And that's one of the great advantages of a plan. I will beat that into the ground as we go along. So a budget gives organization to raising money and makes your strategy a reality. Right? That's not just words. It gives organization. How are you going to do this stuff? And then how are you going to implement your strategy? And the two are connected. Help set and define goals and determine the best fundraising tactics. Again, back to help set and define goals. I have one of my jobs is I meet with candidates. I do this for the SBA, Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. And I meet candidates that come to town and they're trying to basically pitch themselves and say, I can be a great candidate, give me money, et cetera, et cetera. And they go around to see the usual round of PACs and the NRCC and that sort of thing. And I always ask them a question, how much do you think this is going to cost? How much is this race going to cost? And sometimes they have no answer. And I always assume they don't know what they're doing. Because you've got to know how much you're trying to raise. First of all, you ought to figure out what it is it's going to take to win the election. Then you got to say, well, here's the amount of money I'm going to need. How am I going to get it? And if you don't know that, you're just wandering around. You don't have any idea whether you're succeeding, whether you're failing, whether you're going to have what you need. And obviously, you don't even know how you're going to spend it because, you don't have any idea what you're looking for. So definitely it's a plus for having that. Helps your plan confer credibility to outside groups like me or like my group. Or like the state party, or like the NRCC field guy. If you have a plan, well, again, if you're the campaign manager and you have a plan, you need to show that to the candidate. The candidate will say, wow, you got a plan. Other people will say the same thing. If you can show that you know what you're doing, and a budget does that, then it's worth doing. And it measures and monitors your progress, which again goes back to what I was saying before, and I'll say it many times again. How do you know in politics if you're doing all right? We have, if you're a grocery store, you can look at how many people have come in and how much they bought and which things they bought. Any sort of business has some sort of ability to measure progress. Politics is a little different. We only have the way to measure progress really is on election day when we lose or win. And at that point, it's a little too late. But a budget says, here's what we're going to raise, here's what we're going to spend, when we're going to spend it, and how we're going to raise it, and when we're going to raise it. So you can tell if you're not following your budget, you're not succeeding. And so, in other words, we were supposed to raise $55,000 from our fundraising programs by May 1st, and we've raised 10. What does that tell you? Well, you're not succeeding. That's what it tells you. So a budget allows you to measure and monitor your progress. And that means you can make changes when necessary. And I'm talking kind of fast. Part of that's adrenaline, but part of that is because I'm a fast talking Southerner. I'm a bit of an anomaly. So if I go too fast and you want to ask a question, I think you can. So do that. Now I'm going to give you some stuff. 7 budget rules for good budget hygiene. All right. We're going to take these one at a time, so you don't have to write them down, but they're all pretty good. Okay. You can have a budget. What are the things we're going to look for? One of the first things is to be honest. Found dirty white dog, looks like a rat, it's been out for a while, no collar, better be a reward. Okay. That's honesty. Okay. Be honest about what you can do and what you can't do. You won't eat. Right. Another one I like. So it is one thing to say we need to raise a whole bunch of money. It's another thing to say how and where, and let's be honest about what we think we can do. I can't say, well, I'm going to raise $20 million because my heart is pure and my cause is just. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to do that. How am I going to do it? Is the candidate, can the candidate raise money? Is the candidate know money? Is this a good fund? Is this a place without a lot of money floating around? Is it not a place with, be honest about what you can do and what you can't do. All right, that's number 1. Number 2, make your budget match your plan. This not be cheap. I love Gary Larson. And if you're a homeowner, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so you're going to write a campaign. What you really need to do, of course, in most campaigns, I'm sure they've taught this before, but the first thing you do is you figure out how you're going to win. And then you figure out how you're going to fund it. I mean, how are you going to spend? What are you going to spend the money on? How are you going to fund it? So they have to match. I know it seems simplistic, but it has to match. And you want to try to match your budget to what you're actually doing. So the thing that constantly people will say, well, you have to spend, X number of dollars on TV, and you have to spend X number of dollars on this. Pollsters say you have to spend 10% on information, on gathering information, survey research. Other people say you have to spend 15% over here, 10% over there. But what it needs to do is match what you're trying to do, not what other people think ought to be the correct answer. So this is kind of just an example of priorities. Example one, example two. These are very simplistic, but just to get the point across. Example number one, they're going to spend a lot of money on communications. They're going to spend TV, radio, whatever, maybe direct mail, but that's their budget, right? That's where they're trying to keep their fundraising and everything else in reason, but they're really going to do a lot of communications. Now, example two, it's more of a grassroots campaign, 50% into field, more in administration. This is a campaign that's going to try to do a lot of, like I say, door-to-door, telephoning, that sort of thing. I'm not saying this is like one example or the other. It's just an example. But the point is that the budget number two is going to match a heavy field program. Example number one is going to match a heavy communications program. And that's what your budget ought to do. Like some warning signs. And older people here remember this, but some of you will not. This is says warning, danger, Will Robinson. After you've done your budget, one of the things you want to look at and sort of do the numbers and say, gee, you don't want your administrative overhead above 40%. You don't want your communications less than 60%. Now we can define those different ways, but the point is that you've got to be talking to people, not eating up your own money. A lot of staff, a lot of cool offices. I mean, I've seen some campaigns that spend humongous amounts of money on offices. It's just nuts. So you just want to watch out. Don't make sure that administrative overhead doesn't get above 40%. And frankly, it ought to be a lot less than that. But above 40% is really big warning, red flashing lights. Don't do that. Okay. Number three, make a line item for each campaign activity. Use tombstone perfect for someone named Homer Endel Bergenheinzel. This is a real newspaper, right? You kind of wonder about this stuff. I figure it must be some sort of communications from like underlords or drug underlords or something. But anyway, point is that you can sort of, when you put together a budget, you want to sort of think about all you're going to spend and where you're going to spend it, and then put it on a piece of paper. Now, these are very simple budgets I'm going to show you because that way they fit on the screen. Clearly, you probably want to be a lot more detailed than that. But, again, there's a little campaign. This is actually a real campaign budget I did 20, 30 years ago. I don't know how long ago it was. But again, I tried to think of, this was a small state house race which had not much money. $172,000 seems like a lot of money, but it really isn't even for a state house race these days. So I had signs, banners, direct mail. It's clearly direct mail, cable TV. My communications budget's pretty good here. I'm spending a bunch of money on talking to voters. Cable TV, because again, we could focus that. We're going to do some radio, probably very targeted radio. And we had, of course, back then we had to, the pictures. Okay, when you think about that, a lot of campaigns, we go out there and then we don't have it. We're going to print a bunch of mail and we don't have any pictures. So I went and budgeted that. I always budget a little bit. And then there's consultancies, like high price consultant, opposition research, and the survey research back in the days when you could do a survey research for $14,000, trying to find out what our message is. So it's pretty cheap, but that's your strategic, what I call strategic. And then they had the organizational, which was not exactly, some of that's overhead, some of that isn't. So, but again, salaries, expenses, office equipment, labels, bumper, lapel and bumper stickers, office phone, and pre cell phones, phone ID and GOTV, list work, miscellaneous. Okay. So that's a budget. It's not a great budget, but it does reflect what my campaign here was trying to do. We were heavy communications wise, but we did have some operation. We did have some stuff on the ground. But we were really trying to win this thing with message. And so we needed to, that's why the survey research for the right message. So again, this all reflects what my campaign was supposed to be doing. All right. Make a good estimate of what it will cost. A turkey for sale, partially eaten, only 8 days old, both drumsticks still intact. $23 or best offer. That's my favorite part of that. Best offer. Can you believe this? All right. Well, so again, one of the things that we say, well, I don't know how much TV is going to cost. Well, go find out. Pick up a phone. Now with the internet, you can find out almost everything about what things cost. Yeah, it's just make a good estimate of what it will cost. If nothing else, look at the last campaign, look at their FEC reports or their whatever their state reports are, and see what they spent money on. That gives you some idea. But try to make a good estimate of what it will cost, because again, you have to raise this money. You have to know what you have to raise. Again, what's happened recently is that almost everything costs more, with a few exceptions. But you bought signs for $1.49 in the last campaign, and now suddenly they're $2.50. So try to make the best estimate of what it will cost. All right. Number 5, write it down. And now, men, we're off to loot and pillage. But first, Thor will read the minutes from our last loot and pillage. I think it's very funny. I think it is anyway. Okay. So why are we going to write it down? It gives you the tools you need to figure out your overall budget. Tells you how much money you'll have to raise. Gives you a yardstick. The same sort of thing I already talked about. Forces you to make decisions. Now, that's the one I want to jump up and down about a little bit. It forces you to make decisions. Political campaigns have a lot of trouble making decisions. It's one of the things they're not very good at. What do you mean by that? Because decisions are hard, and because whenever you make a decision, you're saying we're not going to do this when we're going to do that, or we're going to do this, we're not going to do that. And politicians, incidentally, are trained not to make decisions if they can help it, particularly legislators. They want to push things off. We're going to have a committee meeting on that where, I want to listen to all the voters. I want to hear what people have to say. There's this good idea. There's that good idea. Whereas executives, president, governor says, we're going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're going to go to war. We're not going to go to war. I mean, decisions. Campaigns don't want to do that. How much TV am I going to buy? Am I going to have a big fundraising event with a big name speaker, or am I not going to do that because it's too much trouble? That's a decision you are forced to make. Your budget forces you to make those decisions. And that's a good thing. Because again, some of you may have a little bit of military experience, some of you may not, but one of the things, I was in the ROTC, and as a lieutenant, I was told it's better to make a bad decision than to make no decision at all. If they're shooting at you, the last thing you can do is sit there and hesitate. And I think that's exactly right in a political campaign as well. Make decisions. Push forward. The budget forces you to do that because I have to write a number down there. Right? That tells me what I'm doing. All right. Number 6, put your budget on a timeline. And before I do that, I want to say invest in some budgeting software, which will force you on a timeline. These are the names of some campaign softwares. There's probably a lot more out there now. These were the ones that were, I did a little search on it, a few years ago, and this is what I rolled up with. Nation Builder, which I thought was pretty good. Trailblazer, a number of campaigns I worked with did use that. Aristotle at one point was the campaign management software. I don't know that it still is. Campaign Bootcamp, Crimson, which is a Republican thing, Campaign Planner, QuickBooks, and then Excel. If nothing else, use Excel. But again, some people don't even have it, but they don't know how to use it. So you have somebody that knows how to use it, invest in some budgeting software, or learn how to use it, and take the time and learn how to use it. And when I was talking about timelines, back to that. Again, military planning, which I think is exactly right, and this is what we teach, is that you started your objective and move backwards. And the same thing with budgeting. How much money, how much money are we spending at the end of the campaign? There's our list. All right. That's our objective. That's where we started. Now let's back out from election day. So then we want to make, one of the things that really is important on this when it comes to organizational work, because I've been in some campaigns and I've been around some campaigns where we did all this work to the first campaign I ever involved in. We did all this work to locate our voters, and then we had no means of turning them out on election day. We had 2 phones. This was when I was in college. We had a little headquarters. There were 2 phones, and we had volunteers manning those phones like 10 hours a day. And we were finding people that were for us. And we found this, by the time we were through, we had talked to just about everybody in the county, and we had about 8,000 people to turn out, and nobody said, okay, how are we going to phone them to turn them out? And so we had the same 2 phones, and we had 8,000 people to talk to. And guess what? It didn't work very well. Well, I learned an important lesson then. So, back out from election day, usually monthly budgeting or quarterly reporting, and after Labor Day, move to weekly. So when you look at your budget, you almost want to think about it week by week by week from about September 1st or Labor Day on. Up to that point, you can use monthly. If you're talking about the off year, you can use quarterly. But the point is that your budget should back out from the election day. Need to show low overhead until September. Another thing to look at and be very careful about is that you're not spending a lot of your budget pre-September 1. Why? Well, because most people still make up their decisions, make their voting decisions late. At least not the hardcore partisans make their decisions early, but all you have to do with those people turn them out. But if you're actually talking to people and trying to persuade them, they're making their decisions late. And since you want to have a big campaign in September and October, because that's when they're talking. Now, a lot of people put money into August, and in some places that works, but a lot of places it doesn't. August is a bad month. For fundraising, it's also a bad month for getting people's attention because they're out on vacation or they're having fun somewhere at the beach. So everything must be in your budget. Operations, logistics, everything, overhead. So here's another sample spending budget. Again, this is on a timeline like this time. See, now I've got May, June, July, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see I've got a radio budget, a direct mail budget, brochures, signs, palm cards, salary. And you'll notice that the bottom line is the spending. There's very little spending going on until I get to September and October. It's a small budget campaign, right? $93,000. But I'm spending more than half that money in September and October. And I would probably, if I didn't have to play this salary guy, I would be spending a lot less. But we have one guy on staff and we have to get him on early. Let's say we do the palm cards early because you need them. Brochures, signs fairly early. But most of everything, the telemarketing here is not out telemarketing. It's actually voter turnout. That's what we used to call telemarketing. So this is a very simplistic budget, but as you can see, it follows the rules. I know what I'm going to do. I notice I'm a much bigger campaign in September and October. I'm trying to keep my overhead low, but I'm still accounting for salaries, rent, the little stuff that has to be done. Just to give you an idea of what a Senate campaign or a gubernatorial campaign, this is a sample advertising budget for, I think it was a Senate campaign. Look at that. Wow. Well, clearly you can't see that very well, so that's why I'm not using an example like that. But we see we've planned it all out. There's quarterly, and then monthly. So, again, this is what you want to try to do. Okay? All right. What about the fundraising side of the budget? This is the part I hate about going to political fundraisers. Okay, we've talked about spending. Now we're going to talk about fundraising. And I realize that that's not the same thing, but we're talking about the budgeting part of fundraising. So still very important. Average cost of winning a congressional race nowadays is humongous. This was 2022, so it's only going to get worse. Okay, now realize that some of these campaigns were incumbents didn't have opponents to speak of, so this is probably a little overblown. But your hot race nowadays for Congress, particularly with the Congress being so close, they're going to spend $3 million on these things easily, and yeah, on both sides. So that's a lot of money. So they got to figure out how you're going to do that. And you have to decide how you're going to raise your budget. Now, here are the ways that we raise budgets: personal solicitation, candidate loan donation, direct mail, digital, large events, small events, PACs, finance committees. And there's probably some other stuff I'm missing. But this is the big ones. And just briefly, because we have the time, I want to talk to you a little bit about the pluses and minuses of these. Now, again, if we were all in a group here, I'd have different people tell me what the pluses and minuses of these, but that's going to be too clumsy here for this kind of lecture. But so I'll do it for you. And if you object, we can talk about it at the end. Personal solicitation. The good news about personal solicitation is it's relatively cheap. And so we do a lot of it because it's the candidate's time. Now, that's not cheap, but early on it is. Candidate's time is worth a lot less early on than it is later on because, there's less for the candidate to do, so he can raise money, or she. But it's just a matter of picking up the phone or talking to people and making appointments and going to see them. It's not expensive for the candidate money-wise, it's time-wise. The pluses are that it's, you can raise a fair amount of money in a fair short amount of time. It's very good for large donors. If your candidate's good at it, they'll get even better at it, and they'll be able to raise a lot of money. Most large groups raise most of their money out of large personal solicitation. Most campaigns do as well. The problem is, of course, there's only one candidate and only so much time. So that's why some campaigns have down here the finance committee, which is a group of the candidate's friends or colleagues or people that owe him money that are willing to go around and talk to other people and ask them for money. Again, it's still personal solicitation. It's just one step removed. The downside is it takes a lot of time. The downside is if there's only one candidate, he can only reach so many people. And the finance committee is the same way. We get a little bit more at the end of that. Candidate loan donation. Many candidates nowadays make a donation or a loan. Under federal election law, you can loan the money, and if you win, you can probably pay yourself back. But if you lose, you probably can't. But a donation of some sort is really kind of almost expected. Now, some candidates don't have any money, and the guy puts in $1,000, and also all the time that's about what he can do. That's fine, but we do put that in the budget. Particularly if the candidate says, yes, I'm going to spend some money. We've got candidates out there running for the Congress or running for Senate right now. So I'm going to put $1 million in. I'm going to put $2 million in. Now, did they budget it? That's the question. So you budget it, you put it on the timeline. When is this going to happen? Okay, I've committed to doing $500,000. When am I going to put it in? Because that needs to be on the budget. When it's going to happen? Because if it doesn't, then you're going to run short sometime, and you have to run to the candidate and say, I need a loan, And the candidate's gone and can't find it. So again, so go ahead and nail that down. One of the things I do with candidates, particularly when they've never run before and they want to make a donation, but I ask them to nail that down early. Here's how much we can afford to spend. We all know some candidate, one of the first campaigns I was involved in, our opponent took a second mortgage on his house. Yikes. I felt terrible for him because we beat him. Well, I liked beating him, but I felt sorry about it. And I've had a candidate who was running in Georgia, and he had put in $75,000, and he was getting ready to rob the kid's education fund. I said, don't do that. All right. But the natural tendency is at the end of the campaign, there's always, gee, if I just had another $50,000, if I just had another $100,000, we could win this thing. Yeah, but maybe you can't afford that. And so make that decision while you're rational, around at the end when you're irrational and you just think, So again, we try to nail that down. Direct mail. Direct mail, the pluses are that it allows you to ask a lot of people for money. Tremendous number. You can ask 10,000 people for money in one day, right? They all sent them all a letter. Downside is not all 10,000 will donate. In fact, when you make money at 2% or 3%, you make good money at 4 or 5%. You lose money at 1% usually. So somewhere between 2 and 3 is was the break even, depending on how much money you spend on it. But it does mean that it does allow you to get a lot of people involved, particularly with small donations. And most of those people, once they give, will give again. One of the things you've seen the internet, I'm sure you get text messages all the time. You only give $5, this. Well, the whole point behind that is to get you lured in. So now you're invested, and you're just, next time I'll give them $25 because I want to protect my investment, or I'll give them 100. So direct mail is kind of the same way. You can raise money with direct mail. It takes time, and it's expensive up front. Now, if you already have a good list, that's even better. But if you don't have a good, if your candidates run before, they've got a list of 1,000 people, 500 people have given before, you'll make good money off direct mail. You just keep mailing, find some new prospects, keep moving. If you're starting from scratch, it's a lot tougher. But again, allows you to raise some money. And again, much like a lot of other fundraising, it gets better at the end of the election. Digital, same sort of rules and regulation, same sort of rules. If you've got a list to start with, you're going to do better. You can raise small money with it till the cows come home. It's not very expensive to do, but it's not that effective. I mean, again, your response rate's even lower, but it costs you a lot less to do it. Mail piece could cost you as much as $1.65 or $2 to send out because of the postage and because of this, that, and the other. Printing, digital doesn't cost anything hardly, but you need lists, and that costs something. Large events raise a lot of money. Yay. Get a lot of good publicity sometimes. Yay. Downside's a lot of work. It's a lot of trouble. Uh, Somebody has to sell those tickets. Somebody has to make arrangements for the guest speaker. Somebody has to set the hallway up. And if you've got a big speaker, like, so the President of the United States is coming in, it destroys your campaign for 3 weeks. That's all you can do for 3 weeks is do that event. Now, if you're making, if you make $500,000 off of it, may be worth doing. But just understand large events will kill you if you're not prepared for it. And most of the campaigns don't have the staff for it. So it takes, you have to get your field guys, you have to get your treasurer. Everybody's involved in trying to make this thing work. But like I say, the advantages is it does give large donors a great excuse to send money. And there's some people that will not respond to your digital, will not respond to your direct mail, but will like to go to large events. My dad was one of them. My dad never gave a dime through the mail, but he loved to go to events. Well, he and his wife he and my mother loved to go to events because they got to, sashay around and see other people and pretend they were important. And it was worth the money. You got to see, people, cool speakers in person. So large events, small events. The great news about them is that you can do an awful lot of them. They don't raise a lot of money at a time, but over time it adds up. It's like the direct mail. And hopefully you can get other people to do a lot of your work for you. Get somebody to host an event in their house, get somebody to have a bunch of people over for breakfast. Candidate wanders in for 30 minutes, talks a little bit, eats a bowl of raisins, and then runs out and goes to another one. So small events are great. Again, not great money, but again, over time, they really work. PACs, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But they're like anything else. They take time, they take effort, they take some money. For instance, and there's something on the candidate solicitation of the PACs as well. And again, this is something you may want to put in your budget as a finance consultant. Now, your congressional race or a Senate race, or you're going to need somebody like that because they know how to do this stuff, and you don't. Usually, whoever you can fire to work to raise money for your campaign has never done this before, or has done it for the local, Kiwanis Club charity. So having somebody that knows how to do this stuff is actually really, really good. And the same thing with PACs. I mean, every one of these PAC fundraisers out of Washington has a list of people that will return their calls, and they know something about them, and they know something about their organization, and they will get you hooked up with them, and that's a really good thing. Same thing with candidate personal solicitation. There are consultants out there that know all the rich people. There's two of them I know in Northern Virginia that know all the rich people, all the rich people that will give to Republicans, and they have the list. And not only do they have the list, they also know what these people like and what they don't like, what they care about, what they don't care about. So it's not a cold call. If you go in to talk to this rich guy over here who's got a bunch of money, he's given to the last two gubernatorial campaigns, Republican candidates for Congress in our area, even though they both lost. So, he's willing to take a chance. And you also know he's a big Virginia Tech fan. So you can go in there and talk about those Hokies. And already you have you're connected. And he also knows the PAC fundraiser. So, or the personal, the large donor fundraiser. So again, you budget that. If you're going to do it, you budget it. And like I say, there's some of these people that are worth their money, and there's other people that aren't. And you have to sort of work around and try to find out what you can find. Same thing about large cities. All the large cities in the country have got some Republican and Democrat fundraising people there, and that's what they do. And they do it for charities, but they also do it for political things. So if you go to New York to raise money, there's a tremendous amount of money in New York still to this day, despite the last few governors and mayors. And they know the list. They know who these people are, and they can get them together at the Hotel Rockefeller, and off you go. But you can't. So it's worth spending some money on them. Okay, the finance committee, I just mentioned that before. Most finance committees don't work, but some of them do. And that's people that love the candidate or love the candidate's cause or hate the opponent so much that they're willing to raise money for them. And you have, it's all volunteer. Sometimes you may pay somebody to sort of watch over them, but their job is to go out and you give them excuses to do that. And the cost is very low, and the returns can be very high if these people are motivated and they work hard. So that's kind of how we raise our budget in a nutshell. And when you think about each of these ways of raising money, you want to try to answer the who, what, where, when, how. Where's the money coming from? The amounts you're going to raise from them, dates for mail, locations for events, meetings, and what's the message? And there are, when you think about different sort of events, one of the things is if you're working with an incumbent congressman, for instance, may sit on an important committee and but they can get the chairman of that committee, the chairman of the banking committee will come to your event. So uh, clearly you want to just talk to bankers and people that are involved in finance. And you have a message for them specifically. So you figure that out and you find the date and you actually write it in the plan. So you want to try to think through that. It's just the same thing with the direct mail. If we're going to do direct mail, when are we going to do it? We're going to do it once a month. Let's set the date. Again, you can change the date, but if you put it on the calendar, you'll start knowing that, gee, we've got events that are bumping into each other and we'll sort them out. This is one of the things you have to do in a finance budget. All right. My next slide. Be realistic. We pull this off, we'll eat like kings. Like I said, I think I mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again. There's some things you can do and there's some things you can't do. I think I'm all in favor of being aggressive and all in favor of pushing to do more than we think we could possibly do. But there's some realism that has to creep in here. You know, this is not a financial example, but it's a political example. A friend of mine years ago ran for state's attorney in Baltimore. And his strategy was to be the last man standing when the incumbent was indicted. So the incumbent gets indicted. He's the alternative. He gets elected. The problem with that was that the incumbent didn't get indicted till after the election. So he lost the election, and then the incumbent got indicted. But so that's not wasn't real realistic. But sometimes, again, you can't say I am friends with so and so. One of my cousins knows Donald Trump, so I think Donald Trump will come and do a fundraising for me. Let's be realistic, right? Okay. Write down your plan to raise more money. Get granular. I already sort of went over this, but when do you do call time? When do you do small events? When do you raise online? What do you spend? How much from each category? I think we already talked about that. Now here is a sample. Okay. Again, little teeny campaign so that we can get it on the board here, and a real campaign that I did years ago. This may be one of those I think I already had on there, part of it. So here's the outgo, May, June, July. Here's where we're spending the money. Yep, see, most of it's in September and October. But here's the income level. Now we're going to put these together. And there's an important reason for that, because we're going to match the bottom number with the top number. With the totals for outgo and May, for instance, are $2,000, and the income is $8,000. So that means we are $6,000 ahead. Yay! And that's our cash flow down at the bottom. So the reason why we do this is so we don't run out of money at some point because we weren't raising enough during that same month. So in June, I'm supposed to raise $9,100. I'm sorry. So spend $9,100, but I'm getting the candidate is now going to kick in some money by raising it. He put in some personal money at the beginning, and now he's going to start raising money. So I've got him for $10,000 basically a month till October, and so that keeps me in the black in May, June, July, August. I'm a little short in September, but only a little bit. I can float that. $1,700 in October, and then I end up $3,600 in debt at the end, which I didn't mean to do. I'd go back and look at this some more. But point is, some of this I'm not going to pay anyway. So the point is that it matches. So this is the reason why you do this. And I've been in a campaign where this happened, and I was a campaign manager, and I let it happen. I think we were going to run a poll in early September, so we had to pay for it in late August, and we didn't have the money for it because we didn't do this very carefully. We just had the money, so we had to basically. What I did, I didn't pay the staff until 2 weeks into October, and I had to make that decision because we really needed that poll. So that's the reason why we do this. You match it again. This is simple. Obviously, a bigger campaign. More complicated campaign is going to have a lot more difficulty in doing this. And again, remember I talked about how it's important to figure out what stuff's going to cost. It's very important because if you're really off on some of this stuff, then like your direct mail is actually going to cost you $80,000, not $43,000. It messes up everything. You're not prepared for it, so you're going to have to make terrible decisions. That make sense? All right. Fundraising ratios, just an example. The only reason I mention this is the challengers usually don't raise much PAC money. They do much better with small events. Large events are tougher for them. Lots of call time. It's just an example. But again, when you've done your fundraising budget, you want to look back and see what you think you can do. And some stuff it's just not possible. So back to being realistic. Give an example. This is from a few years ago, but I'm sure it's still 2020. But then the blue, it shows how much money PACs gave to incumbents for Congress. The orange is the challengers, and then the green is the open seats. So as you can see, challengers just don't raise the money that the incumbents do. That doesn't mean you can't raise some, and you shouldn't, and you should try, but it does mean that the world's against you. PACs are they're interested in giving money to people that can help them do what they want them done. They're not very aggressive. Now the difference in that is that if they really hate Congressman Schmo because he's done terrible things to them, they'll probably dump a bunch of money in for you. But you have to make the case to them. And again, look at the bottom, the ideology single issue. They really care more. They're not willing to go along, and so they're willing to take chances more. There used to be a oil PAC called Wildcatters PAC, and these were people that were wildcatters. They dug wells looking for oil, and they knew that there's a certain amount of those were going to come up dry, and so they were very aggressive in giving to challengers, not incumbents. If the incumbents can take care of themselves, they'll give money just to challengers, and particularly to people that were against the oil industry. So you can find people that'll help you, I think. All right. I've got a few more things I want to talk about, and then we'll end up. Yeah, budgeting is great, but you have to have command and control. Clear and detailed spending procedures. In my case, it was all sense of a mission. I could never get organized. Yeah, it's all right to have a budget, but the budget has to match what you're doing. And there's some campaigns you never sign to get. They write a budget and then they sort of put it in the drawer and they forget about it. So what you need is at least once a month, if not more often, somebody to check to see if you're overspending your budget or underspending your budget on each category. Churches do this, businesses do that, and campaigns need to do it. I've budgeted, $1,600 for yard signs, and I realized that we've spent $3,000 on yard signs. I'm off budget. I'm going to take that off someplace else or raise more money. But you don't know that if you don't check it. Command and control is a military phrase for that what you tell them to do actually gets done, and you control it to make sure it gets done. So same sort of thing. I have a budget. I say to my field staff, my field guy, I say, we've got this much money we can spend on yard signs. We got this much money we can spend on brochures. We got this much money we can spend on paid staff or on paid walkers. Stay in the budget. And his job is to say, yes, I can do that, or no, I can't, and we renegotiate it. But the point is that if he goes over or under, I need to know. So there has to be some sort of control mechanism in your campaign that every now and then lets you know how the spending is going. Seriously, this is really important. Campaigns screw up all the time because they've got people who've never done this before, never done any budgeting before, and they assume that if they put it on the budget that everybody will follow it. But who's following it? You're the campaign manager, for instance. You've got way too much stuff to do. So find somebody or find a process that will keep you in control, and you will know what you're spending your money on when you want. There's nothing. I always tell this story about this race in Georgia. It was Mac Mattingly, who was a one-term senator, U.S. senator, but he was the first U.S. Republican senator since Reconstruction. So that's not nothing. Anyway, he had a pretty good campaign manager who was very good at making decisions, very good at message, very good at all kinds of stuff, not so good at budgeting. So at the end of the campaign, Mattingly is closing down his office. He's kind of a hands-on guy. And closing down the campaign office. The campaign manager had gone back to Ohio or New Jersey or wherever she came from. And he opens a drawer in her desk, and it's full of bills, invoices, unpaid invoices, unpaid, $100,000 worth. Well, it's amazing how she got away with that. I mean, I don't know how most people won't take an IOU from a campaign, but back then I guess they did. Anyway, point is that it wasn't that she was doing anything wrong or necessarily. It's just that she had no process. She had no idea what was in there. And I've seen that happen on a smaller level too. So command and control is very important. That means you need to decide some things. Who can authorize spending? Now you say, well, small campaign, it's the campaign manager or the candidate. Fine. Big campaign, can other people authorize spending? And what happens is sometimes people authorize spending that shouldn't. And we have what we call mystery bills. Mystery bills show up at the head campaign headquarters. Here's an invoice for $2,000 for food for something or other, right? I didn't authorize that. Is that in the budget? No, no. So, yeah, wow. So one of the things to do about training your staff is tell them they don't get to spend money unless they talk to you or they talk to somebody. But there's some sort of system that authorizes spending. Who keeps the checkbook? Not as important since we have digital stuff, but who has access to the digital for that matter? Yeah, somebody's got to control the checkbook. Who can sign checks? Very similar to authorized spending. Who keeps the financial records? Again, most times now we've got, but again, we can put that in Excel or you can hire somebody to do it. But the point is somebody has to keep the financial records because again, you don't know what's doing. How often do we reconcile the budget? At least once a month, early in the campaign, later in the campaign, once a week. Reconcile the budget. Did we spend money where we were supposed to spend it? Are we spending too much money on some things, not enough on others? I know it sounds very bureaucratic, but it's very necessary. A good campaign manager should be able to know where he or she is spending all their money, where it's going, where it's not going, and where their deficits are. How much can we spend without the candidate's approval? Small campaigns, even big campaigns sometimes, campaign managers in charge, making decisions all the time, spending money all the time. Candidates out there raising money, but also making speeches, talking to the press, going door to door. That's not their job to approve, spending for more paper clips. Or even spending for, to hire another staffer. They'll get the agreement, but then negotiating, that's up to the campaign manager. So a lot of campaigns, they'll put a limit. Can't, and this, you do this early on. You say, look, I can spend up to $10,000. I can spend up to $5,000 without your approval. You'll know about it, but just making the decision is my job. Or maybe they say no, $500, but you make some sort of decision on there. What you don't want to have is a very, very mad candidate demanding your head because you made a rational decision and spent an extra $10,000 on a poll that you really thought we needed, and he didn't know about it. He doesn't like the decision, and you're in trouble, and maybe you get fired for making the right decision. So set a limit. Who will provide a weekly financial report? Again, I've been lucky in my life as a campaign manager, I've had several times where I found retired accountants who did a weekly report for me and told me every week what I had in the bank, what I owed, what came in and where it came from. It was wonderful. You can make great decisions that way. You can't make decisions without good information. One of the things that's interesting, we can talk about that later. I'm talking about, okay. So just little jokes here. Details are important. Pay attention. Another one I like. Okay, I've got two more slides and then I'm going to take questions. When money comes into the campaign, it needs to be followed as well. So I use a flow chart. Other people could use something else, but the point is that money going in is just as important as money going out. What happens to it? And a lot of campaigns fall down on this. It's not hard. You just need a system. Put the system in place. It takes care of everything. So here's my system. A check arrives at the front desk of the campaign. Well, it's not a check. It could be, it could be digital, whatever. It goes to the finance director. The finance director says, okay, we can't take this check. It's from Abdul El Qassoum, who is a local terrorist, or it's from the oil companies. And right now the oil companies are raising their rates and everybody hates them. Whatever it is. So you can reject them, or they've already just hit their limit for the state. We got to reject it. So off it goes that way. Otherwise, the finance director then sends the information to the campaign secretary and the treasurer. The treasurer puts the information in his files or in the computer. An FEC report is generated because this is for congressional, but all campaign spending nowadays is highly regulated, so you want to follow the rules. And also, if it's a direct mail piece or something, you want some sort of analysis of how it's doing. Is the direct mail piece working or not? Did we lose money or raise money on the big ticket event? The other thing, it goes to the campaign secretary, who may be a volunteer, and you get a form letter generated, and then the thank you letter is mailed. Some campaigns just don't do that, and guess what? You get fewer repeat business when you don't send them a thank you letter. Also, if it's a large donor, a different thank you letter is generated. The candidate signs the letter, and then the thank you letter is mailed. But the point is that people get thanked. Finally, the finance director goes down the list, makes a list of large donors generated for the candidate and the finance chairman. Why? Because when the candidate has asked somebody for $10,000 or $5,000, and then the guy says, "Well, I'll think about it," the money comes in, the candidate is at a party 2 weeks later, runs into the guy. He needs to be able to say, "Hey, thanks for the big donation," rather than just look at him and the other guy looks at him and gets mad and says, "I'm never going to give you again, you jerk. You don't even know I gave you money." So candidates need to know large donations. So again, this is a system. You don't have to be a system like this, but you need a system to handle money coming in, right? This goes in the budget and it goes against the budget. Are you with me? Okay. I've got one more. It's crude but effective. I got one more, and then I'm going to shut up and take questions. Events. You need a forum for events, particularly fundraising events. Because again, what happens is, and it happens all the time, is candidate runs into somebody that somebody says, "I'm going to I'd like you to come to our Baroque Bingo banquet, which is going to be taking place in about 3 weeks over at the Jefferson Hotel. And once you come, oh yeah, I'll try to do that." Right. Not going to do it. You can't make that decision. You need the name of the event. You need this information filled out. And what your candidate needs to be trained to do is say, call my scheduler or call somebody, the campaign manager, somebody, and tell them all about the event. I'd love to come to that thing, but I can't commit because I don't even know my own schedule. So call them and they'll set it up. And then the guy or whoever's on the other end of the phone gets this information. And then the campaign can make decisions. What's the purpose of the event? How many people? How much money? Where's the location? Directions. I mean, yeah, the location is, but we find out the location is 3 hours away, all right, from the last event. We can't do it. You can't make that decision unless you know where the event is. You don't need to know. Yeah, and then we've got down at the bottom, deadline to cancel, staff needed, recommended or not recommended by the manager, staffer in charge. And then some or another, we give them a written acceptance or written rejection. Every campaign I've been in has had one situation where somebody calls or writes or something and says, "Where's, Congressman Schmo?" Or "Where's Delegate, Jones? Dithers, where's Delegate Dithers?" "Well, he's over here." "Well, he's supposed to be at our banquet, and we're over in, East Tub Thump, and we're expecting him because he said he was going to come." Yikes! Now, he may have said that. He may not have said that. But at least if we have a written rejection or a written acceptance, we know whether we screwed up or he screwed up. At least somebody else's head is going to roll. So again, this is a great little technique, I think, to keep track of your events. It's a scheduling thing exactly, but again, it really works for fundraising as well. So with that, I will just skip that one. The victorious army wins its battles before seeking them. An army destined to defeat fights in the hope of success. Let me unpack that. A victorious army, the guys that win, they win the battles before seeking them. In other words, they figure out how they're going to win this thing. An army destined to defeat fights in the hope of success. Gee, we hope this is going to work. Doesn't cut it in politics. Doesn't cut it. Every now and then it works. A lot of times it doesn't. And we don't want to be the defeated army. We want to be the victorious army. So we're going to figure out a budget and a plan before we get into this battle, or at least early on in the battle, before in the war. So with that, I'll take any questions. I got one more slide. There you go. Yes, I believe there's a question in the back. So
Thank you so much, Carla, for this amazing presentation. So let me see for the questions that we have. So let me see. So the first one is, what's the cheapest way to do digital ads without using a consultant?
Find a teenager, I think. Yeah, if you know what you're doing, it's actually fairly inexpensive to do. And I'm probably not the best person to ask that question because again, what I tend to do is I tend to hire consultants to do it for me. But I know that there are also people that have done a little bit of this stuff hanging around in your community that if you know where you can find them, they can do it. And sometimes they'll do it for free. And I would say there's also a lot of consultants out there that are fairly cheap. So I guess what I would do is I would ask around to other candidates and see, or other campaigns and see who they've used and how they've used it. That would be my best guess. I'm not going to give you a great answer on that one. I'm sorry.
All right, perfect. Let's see if there's um so someone says here, what is the best email platform for political? The open rate in Mailchimp was very low. Let me see something else.
Usually, if you have trouble with open rates, it's the list. Well, sometimes it's how you email them. There's an organization called oh no, it's not this or that or Run and Win. What is the name of that organization? Um, I get their emails all the time, and I'm sorry, I'm just not coming up with the name off the top of my head. But they actually research this stuff, and they publish stuff on their website all the time. They test. They'll say, okay, we're going to test putting the picture at the top and putting the picture at the bottom, and we've got 20,000 of these and 20,000 of those. Which one works better? And it's amazing sometimes some of the stuff they come up with. It makes such a big difference in response rate. Uh, Sometimes it's pictures, sometimes it's the way they introduce the things. I find it fascinating. Uh, and I think I'm sorry, I just cannot come up with the name of the firm, but I'll tell you what, we will make sure that everybody gets it. Because I think they're great and they are just great. Um, but
Perfect.
again, what I find most of the time, it's the list you're using. It's not necessarily MailChimp's fault or one of the other organizations. It's just the list is no good.
So I have there's another question. How to check if someone is for a foreign donor?
Well, first of all, they have a foreign address, but that's a good question. Uh, if the U.S. Yeah, well, we have a form when it's a direct mail piece or a digital piece. When you fill the thing out at the bottom, it says there's usually a disclaimer talking about you have to be a U.S. citizen. Um, and so if you send it in, you've done the best you can. In other words, we've done our duty by asking them if they're making sure they're selling and making sure that they only give to us if they're a U.S. citizen and they can only obey the laws. And you'll see that in really small print on direct mail, and you'll also see it on digital stuff once you get to the donation page. And just you want to make sure you have something like that in there. And then it is not your fault if they gave you a bunch of money because you did what you could. And that's again when we think about politics. Um, Again, I could say my name is Carlisle Gregory, and my real name is Abdul Fazez, and I'm from Iraq or Iran or something, and I'm trying to influence the American political system with my money. Uh, there's nothing you can do about it. So again, you've done your due diligence. I don't know if that
Perfect.
helps or
Thank
not.
you. And we have a last question. So how many mailers on average should be used in a campaign?
Well, that's a kind of it depends type question, but I will try to address it. I think the short answer is as many as you can get away with. Um, but the rule of thumb is that probably once every 6 weeks until the end is about from 1 month to 6 weeks is about what you can do and not get your donors so mad that they'll quit giving. You can't overload them. It's interesting because on the digital stuff, we seem to break that rule all the time, but they get away with it. But in mail, I think it's a different dynamic. Maybe it's because it's older donors. The average donor direct mail is like 64 or something. It means half of them are older. Think about that. Um, but I think the part of the theory is that they've got time to read their mail and young people don't, or also they're just not used to it. Take your pick. But the point is that you can if you don't mail them fairly often, then you don't they won't give either. That's one of those funny things about direct mail. You have to mail them enough so that they keep you in mind, but not so much that you annoy them. So a month to 6 weeks is about right. When you get to September and October, you can double that. You can mail them twice. You can mail them twice a month. And I've even mailed a third letter like a week before the election and actually gotten great responses on it because people are more interested. And they say, this is getting excited. And you can tell them, gee, we're on TV. Here's a picture of our TV, or here's a direct mail piece. Let me show you what we're doing here. And they get excited. Or here's a picture of our billboard. I tell you, I love selling billboards by direct mail. It's amazing. People will give money for that. And then you tell them where their billboard is. So we use your money to buy the billboard, and it is on Fourth and F, down in Lower Tub Thump, and they'll drive by to take a look at it. They love that stuff because they can actually physically see what they're doing, and direct mail actually, it's one of the great things about direct mail. If you're good at it, you tell people what they're buying, and not just give me money because I'm a good guy. Give me a good money because I'm a good guy, and I'm going to use your money to send out 6,000 mail pieces or whatever it is to this group, and they're going to say, "Wow, that's great. I know what my money's going to." So again, I would load it up at the end, keep it fairly sparse, but not too sparse during the summer and the spring. And if you
Oh,
have a good reason, and by the way, if you have a really good reason, so you send on a mailer, that arrives on April 15th, or April 14th or April 18th. It said it's tax time. Wow, that gets you. Or it's the 4th of July, or there's something going on, something big that you can get an extra mail piece and you can go ahead and do that. Okay.
perfect. Thank you so much, Carla. Well, that concludes our workshop. So thank you so much again to everyone that attended. Make sure you have here our link tree and the QR code, and make sure as well to sign up for our email list. Uh, it was a very, very great panel. I think personally, everyone that attended again.